Welcome, everyone. This is Tuesday, March 12th, 2024. It is 6:32. This is the Finance Committee meeting, and I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the
republic,
stands
one nation, God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all. Thank you. Cindy, you can read the introduction.
Okay, I will make the announcement that this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts, March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20. On March 29th, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you for that. Just want to make sure our Finance Committee members here. I see Al Lees, Christopher Thrasher, Cindy Brown, Duncan Law, Hugh Morton. Joe, I don't think I see Gary. And I don't see his phone number, so I don't think we have Gary. And Michelle Orlando could not be here tonight. So just make sure we've got everybody. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you.
We're also missing Zach.
We're missing Zach. Thank you.
Right.
So we're missing Zach and Michelle Orlando
And Gary.
and Gary. Okay.
But we have 6.
Great, thank you. Well, the first item on our agenda tonight is to discuss, we have a presentation from the Infrastructure Committee to talk about the water sewer articles and give the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to the committee. I'd like for you to introduce who's here on the committee, and then I will turn over let you start your presentation. So who's going to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll start if you'd like. This is Steve Willett. I'm chairman of the Infrastructure Committee, also accompanied by Murray May. He's the secretary of our committee, and we have Roger Fernandez, who's the consultant, and he has a lot of technical stuff for you. Murray's pretty good at working the numbers, and he'll get into how we just found more money, which should make you guys happy. It's starting to look really good as far as finding money. Very briefly, the issue about water and sewer started up again due to tainted wells, failing septics, pollution into the river, housing needs, and a number of other smaller factors. But the main thing was the state was going to force people to upgrade their septic systems to the tune of approximately $30,000. We got by on a wing and prayer, and they're aiming for the Cape first, making them upgrade their septics before us. Another thing that happened is we had the ARPA funding money to help with some seed money, along with Mike Roderick's getting $1 million earmarked for Route 6. Murray will get a little deeper in the numbers, but I'm just telling you where it started, why this is sort of being rushed, if you will. We're trying to get out the information as quick as possible. But another reason is some of the funds have to be expended sooner than we expected. Some of the funds were supposed to be expended later in the year, and now they made it, I believe, in June. I don't know if Jim Hartnett made it. He was going to get into that. So with that, when you're ready, we'll pass it on to Roger and Murray, who have the numbers and more details, whatever you need to know.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to start at page 3. Roger, can they see the presentation?
Let me see if I can do that now. Okay. Bear with me one second.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can see the first page, Roger. There you are. We can see the first page. I don't know if you can get that more.
Absolutely. How's that?
I mean, can you make it bigger? Because I see, all the
Sure.
the function bars at the top, and
Should load now. Can you see it better now?
I think it's the same.
No, we still got a lot of function bars, but I mean, I think it's workable, isn't it?
Well,
Karen, is it okay?
let me try to improve on that a little bit. Just bear with me.
Make it full screen.
Yeah. Let me move it over to this screen here. Any better?
No, it's not full.
No, I
That's
went to
That's-
the bar, right to the,
Sean has put into presentation mode.
no. I'm aware of that. Let me just give me. I can see it okay on my screen.
you know what, I think this is workable.
It is.
You know,
We can see it
not
and the committee has received a copy over the weekend, so we have it also, but
Okay.
I think
Right.
once you click on a slide, I think we'll see it a little bit.
Roger, if you go to slideshow,
Yeah.
Yes, we have a slideshow.
Yeah. I've put the slideshow. It's
it
still
doesn't
not.
work. Okay.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's not. Just give me one more try here, and let me see if I can get this to open up here. I have two screens going, so let me see if I unplug one of my screens.
Even if you hide your toolbar.
Let's try that.
It wiggled a little bit, but nothing happened.
We
Nothing?
can try it with this. We can try it. with
Okay.
this.
Okay, should we go with this? Okay, can you switch from the cover slide to the second? That's a little better.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it's from, but that should get us there. Okay.
Okay, so we are the Infrastructure Oversight Committee, and we were created by the Board of Selectmen a couple of years ago to oversee the planning and construction of the Route 6 Water and Sewer Trunk Line Project. And you can see the members of our committee. We have a committee of 8 with Jim Hartnett, our town administrator, coming to all the meetings, and of course assisted by Roger Fernandez. Okay, Roger, slide 3.
Okay.
Agenda, very quickly. It's seven different topics. First of all, the reasons for water sewer. Second of all, a map. Third, funding. Fourth, tax implications. Fifth, enterprise fund and fees. Sixth, a schedule. And seventh, town votes. Next slide, please.
Mhm.
So there are 3 reasons for the water and sewer project. The first one is economic development, because Route 6 was put out of business by 195 about 50 or 60 years ago. And there's a lot of land there that was developed that now can be redeveloped. And we'll have more details on slide number 8. But I want to mention 2 other benefits that maybe the Finance Committee is not focusing on, but I assure you other people in town are focusing on. Number 1, the environmental improvement. Septics and especially cesspools put nitrogen and bacteria and other pollutants into the groundwater that make their way to the river and degrade the health of the river. And I'm sure you've heard about the nitrogen impact in recent years. And so we have the environmental groups, our own Westport River Watershed Alliance, but also the Buzzards Bay Coalition, very much interested in this project to help clean up the river. And also health benefits. The Board of Health, I assure you, supports our project here, because this project will deliver, it'll be the trunk line to ultimately deliver to the adjoining neighborhoods clean, healthy drinking water. And so those are the 3 reasons for this project. I'd like to go to the next slide, Roger, the project map.
Okay.
This is Route 6 in the diagonal line. It's 4.8 miles long and essentially goes from the Fall River line at White's to the Dartmouth line. We have, on this one project, we have three contracts. And the contracts are really divvied up by the engineers. We are using Kleinfelder engineers, by the need for pumping stations. Just a little background, you probably already know it, but water comes under pressure into the town from Fall River, but sewer is gravity downhill, pumped uphill, gravity downhill, pumped uphill, and then gravity downhill. So these three contracts are really delineated by the needs for pumping stations. We have the biggest pumping station is going to go at White's, right on the Fall River line, to get whatever our system collects into the Fall River system. The first pump station is at Meatworks, and so that's the end of the first contract. At Meatworks, it's going to pump up the hill a little bit, and then gravity will take it down. Then you go to around the Bread and Cheese Brook area. That's pump station number 3, and that will pump it up and then down again. And the third contract is at the, or not right at, but very close to the Dartmouth line, and that's where the fourth pump station will go. And those are the three contracts. Now, we are estimating of 35 million. That's the number we've been using for a couple of months, that this project will cost 35 million. We established this number when the engineers were estimating the project at 31 million. So the 35 gave us a 4 million buffer. Last Friday, we got an upgrade in costs that the project is now estimated to cost 34 million. So our 4 million buffer all of a sudden became a much smaller $1 million buffer. That's the project map. The next area is on the next slide. This is slide number 6, Roger. I just wanted to demonstrate the funding commitment that we have gotten from the town, primarily the Board of Selectmen, but also the ARPA committee, and especially our State Senator Michael Rodrigues. Early funding came mainly from the senator, $50,000 grant for design of contract 1, plus a $380,000 for further design of contract 1. That really came from rural administration. But Rodrigues came up with a $1 million earmark a couple of years ago, and we're still working on that money. $612,000 spent to date, $388,000 balance remaining. But also, as you probably know, there's Bristol County ARPA money. The town's getting $2.8 million of this money. Comes in 4 tranches of about $700,000 each. And the ARPA committee is allocating about $1 million of this 2.8 to the town of Westport. And we have allocated $789,000 so far, and we have $211,000 remaining. Steve Willett, in his introductory remarks, mentioned that we have to designate this Bristol County ARPA money by June, or else, use it or lose it. Bottom line, we have allocated about $1.8 million so far to primarily engineering design of the Route 6 project. Let's go to number 7, page number 7. Alternative funding opportunities sought and tax credits. I'll do the funding, and Roger can do the tax credits. But we have been working on loans and grants. Obviously, grants are better than loans because you don't have to pay them back. But there are state loans that are relatively inexpensive. So we have pursued grants and loans. The goal was to lower the project cost and the tax burden. And applications have been submitted for key funding opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. We have applied for the state revolving fund loan. This is 2.4% money. And last year we applied for $7.5 million, really to build contract 1. And just recently we realized that we have made the IUP for 2024. And the important part about this 7.5% loan is that it's at 2.4% for 20 years. If we had to go to the investment bankers in the public market, we'd be looking at 3.5%, maybe 3 3/4. So just this one little tranche of 7.5 million alone can save us over $1 million. And if we can get this 2.4% money to build the whole thing, it will save millions. Second of all are the Mass Works grants. This is where we tie into a commercial project. We've had 2 strikes against us. We haven't had a good commercial project. Filed twice, rejected twice. PFAS, this is a pollutant that there's money to repair. It's for fresh water. It's for the water line side, not the sewer side. But there's $4 million that we look like we're going to get to help build the water line. And then there's congressionally directed spending, otherwise known as earmarks. We last year applied to both the Senate and the House for earmarks. We had some success in the House. Our Representative Bill Keaton supported us all the way through congressional subcommittee meetings last summer, and we seem to have about 960,000, call it $1 million, coming from Senator Keating's earmark. Last year, we did not have as much success in the Senate with Markey and Warren. We hope to change that in 2024. And we will hopefully get money from them. It's important because the senators have more money than the House of Representatives. So if we can get some from Markey and Warren, that would be very helpful. Any grant we get would come right off the top, would lower the amount of loans we would have to take. And that would be very good. Roger, I'm going to let you handle this 2023 Massachusetts tax credit.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Murray. So as you can see, fairly recently, Massachusetts has included a pretty significant tax credit for homeowners who address their septic systems. More specifically, as it relates to this project, offers that tax credit to property owners that want to connect their municipal sewers. So the project itself does not cover the costs of the connection to the properties. The project will bring sewer stubs to the properties, and then from the property line into the property itself that's a requirement that the landowner is going to have to take on from an expense standpoint. But the details, as you can see, it's up to $18,000 or 60% of 30. That's where we get the 18, and the $30,000 is a fairly high connection cost. Depending on where the sewer system is introduced into the residence, and so you would have an annual limit of $4,000 carried over up to 5 years for that tax credit. So it's a pretty good deal. And in terms of timing, the credit is available in the tax year when the sewer is actually connection work actually takes place and is completed.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Go to slide number 8.
Okay.
And want to talk more about the potential economic development of water and sewer infrastructure along Route 6. So we see indications of real economic growth potential here on Route 6. First of all, it has a strategic position linking it to I-195, Route 24, and Route 88. This enhances accessibility. We have a new Marriott Hotel, which signifies opportunities for other growth of service-oriented businesses. And the provision of sewer services has readied private organizations or private businessmen for beginning new developments or refurbishing existing ones. And this is very important. We did mostly work on that first contract 1 area, but I sent to Karen over the weekend, and I think all of you have seen them, various letters of support for the sewer project from local businessmen who have the possibility for development or redevelopment. Number 1 is Bristol Pacific. The Edgewater Apartments. There are 2 towers. They want to build a 3rd if they have sewer. The old motel. It was recently purchased. It's an old motel with about 15 units. The new owner wants to redevelop that into maybe 50 apartment units. Eddie Costa and his son have 2 little shopping centers. They want to redevelop that property. And then there is the Meatworks, and they have number 1 a problem because they have to truck. They have 2 kinds of effluent, the regular toilet and sink effluent, but they have another kind. It's a wash down of the facility every afternoon, and that cannot go into a Title V. That's go into a truck and be trucked to the Fall River wastewater treatment at great expense. So those are 4 projects that can be undertaken with sewer once it gets in that contract one area. I feel like there's really a pent-up demand, but it's not just me. If you go to the right-hand side, we had a SERPID report done in 2018, and they published it 5 years ago, and they said, you know, in various scenarios, or the middle of the road mixed scenario, that we could have 423,000 of annual tax increase. That was 5 years ago. Adjusted for all the inflation we've had, we're looking at 520,000, and that's just for the first 1 mile, and that is just for 1 year. We've got almost 5 miles of Route 6. Can you triple that? Can you quadruple it? Can you quintuple it? But you know, the build out here, and it won't happen right away, but I think over the years, the build out here is perhaps $2 million of annual tax revenue increases. 2 million over 10 years is $20 million. And this is a way to help the town budget without passing an override, which this town does not seem to want to do. So anyhow, I think there's real economic development opportunity and with this water and sewer project on Route 6. And now I'd like to turn it over to Roger. We get into some of the complexities of the actual financing of the project. Roger?
Thank you, Murray. So I think it's important to first discuss some of the terminology. And on this particular project, when we're discussing funding allocation, we're referring to the cost sharing approach that will pay for the relevant project costs to be split between a townwide levy over 20 years via debt exclusion, and the property owners who ultimately benefit from the improvement via a betterment assessment. Now, of course, betterments are charges for the improvements that increase property value, which are attached as liens on the property once operational at the property. And when we say operational, we mean available at the property line. Project costs are shared among the benefiting property owners through special assessments that, again, will be paid for a period of 20 years. There's special legislation that talks about how we administer the betterments, and those methodologies were included in the calculations for the betterments that we'll talk about a little bit more here. So again, in terms of allocation of project sharing, we've got a total project cost of $35 million. And as Murray stated, we've got a very recent estimate. And by recent, I mean earlier, I think this week, or no, I'm sorry, excuse me, late last week. And so we have the portion of the project that is just sewer, which is contract 1, and then portions of the project that are sewer and water, to include contracts 2 and 3, or sections 2 and 3. But the sharing portion, when we refer to the sharing portion, we're referring to just the sewer. So the sewer portion, or the cost associated with the sewer portion for the betterment, is $6 million when we apply a 20% allocation. The remaining cost of $24 million, or 80%, would be shared townwide. So in that scenario, if the project is, if the property is bettered, the property owner would be responsible for payments on that betterment, plus they would see the property tax change that the entire town would be seeing. So the portion of that of the overall project that represents water is $5 million direct costs, and so that $5 million portion representing the water would be spread across the town. So of course,
Roger, 1 second.
sure.
I was hoping that we can hold our questions until the end, but I see Al has had his hand up. Al, do you have something really quick to ask, or are you able to wait to the end of the presentation? I know you've had your hand up, so I don't want to ignore your question.
Wait, it's fine. I had something in my head and I just want to make sure that I didn't forget it. So no, keep going, please.
All right, thank you. We'll let you finish the presentation and then
Okay.
we'll ask. So sorry about
Oh,
interrupting.
No worries, no
Thank
worries. Thank you. We've got a couple of slides left and we should be good to go. But so I think we talked about this slide. So of course, the ultimate question is what's this going to cost? So we did do an assessment in terms of the tax impacts, and what we're looking at now is the amount of properties that are represented as residential across the top of the first table running from the top cell from left to right, residential, commercial, and then the total amount of properties. The assessed value, that's a town-wide assessment, and by assessment we mean the net worth, if you will, of the town and all its assets. And then the next line, of course, is the current tax levy on, again, residential, commercial, or non-residential, if you will, and then the total as represented at a little over $30 million. So in terms of the loan itself, again, we're looking at 20-year, and that's across the board for both betterments and the debt exclusion. As Murray mentioned, we're using a conservative value of 3.75, and the hope is that SRF comes through, which would reduce that rate, which would ultimately impact the assessments. The projected project cost of $35 million, and the current tax rate, which is, as you know, the same for both residential and non-residential properties. Now, one thing we've talked about when we began to look at the EDU, which is an equivalent dwelling unit, and I'll talk about that a little more in a second, was to try to limit or cap the equivalent dwelling unit to $10,000 approximately. So what an equivalent dwelling unit is a unit of measure that is applied to one residential property. And some of the language that we're using now is, again, pulled right from MGL, Mass General Laws, and it's a method that we would use to apply the betterment. But it should not be mistaken to be thought that every property is going to be assessed one EDU. By that I mean, if it's a single family, one resident, then yes, that's a one EDU at $10,000 or thereabouts. But the EDU measuring process, that methodology can, on certain larger properties, if they're commercial in particular, we may be assessed or will be assessed more than $10,000 over the life of the betterment. So again, cost sharing allocation, the sewer portion, 30 million at 80%, townwide at 20%. I'm sorry, 80 million townwide and 20% via the betterment. And as we look down at the next table, we have the breakdown. 80% sewer equates to $24 million. 100% of the water was $5 million. And the total townwide contribution to the project would be $29 million. And then the remaining $6 million would be, just for the sewer, would be paid via betterments. And then of course, the proposed tax rate impact per thousand would be 35 cents on the sewer, 7 cents on the water, for a grand total of 42 cents impact townwide. So next, we're looking, the next row, we're looking at what the actual tax rate would become. And when we add up both the water and sewer portions townwide, the tax rate would increase from $7.73 to $8.15. In the next row, we're looking at a average assessed value for property of $596,000 and the average tax bill. So again, using the same methodology on the bottom row, we can see that on that particular property, with an assessment of $596,000, they would see an annual increase of $250. And the last cell to the right, where we just reiterate that we estimate $10,000 per EDU, which equals one residential unit, which is equal to the annual assessment, which equates to about $800 per EDU annually, based on a 20-year borrowing period at 3.75%. Oh, and again, I just want to.
As Roger mentioned, we are very hopeful the state revolving fund will come through at 2.4% for not just the first contract, but for 2 and 3 as well. In addition, grants would come right off the top. So we will work diligently to reduce that cost.
Right. And then just bullet number 3, one thing that we're trying to be careful to say is that ultimately the final value of all these figures is going to be dependent on the final bid results for the project. Okay. So here's a table that more specifically looks at an assessed value and what that particular property might be expected to pay. And in the last column, we break that down by weekly costs. We understand that that's not how the bill is paid, but to give folks a sense of what they would expect to pay per week per residence. So looking from left to right, a $550,000 assessed value on a home could expect to spend $4.44 in increased tax assessment for this particular project. I should say for the portion of the project that's not represented by the betterments. So, Murray, you want me to handle this as well? Or I don't want to step on you.
So I will handle this.
Okay.
So we already have a little water utility in the North End. It's been there 30 or 40 years. We've got 163 customers, and we buy the water from Fall River, and it goes into septics or cesspools. And supporting that is an enterprise fund called the Waterline Enterprise Fund. You can see it in town annual reports going back years and years and years. That already exists. Now, best practices demand that we also establish a new enterprise fund for the sewer portion. Apparently, it's better not to mix the two. So we will be asking town meeting to establish a sewer enterprise fund. Now, what about the user fees? What about the rates? What about the water rates, and what about the sewer rates? And right now, we do have the water rates. What Fall River does is they charge their own customers $3.77 per 100 cubic feet. That's about 728 gallons. They mark up their retail rates 55% when they sell the water to us. And so our cost to Fall River is $5.84 per CCF. We additionally add another 25% charge for our own O&M, bringing our total water rate up to $7.28 per CCF. I think we also have a fixed charge of about $25 a quarter. We bill quarterly, so that's $100 a year. But those are current rates. Now, the sewer rates are already established by Fall River. The White's Restaurant is connected to the Fall River sewer system. So we do have that one sewer, but that was a private deal. The LaFrance family, paid Fall River just to tie in because they've got a restaurant and 2 hotels, etc. So, but anyhow, the base rate is $6.06 per CCF from Fall River. We would they mark that up 55%, and then that brings it to $9.39. If we were to mark it up again 25% for our own O&M, that would bring the rate to $11.74 per cubic feet. I will note that there is a break point. There is a threshold at 100,000 gallons per day of water and sewer, whereby the Fall River rate goes from 55% premium over their own retail rates to 5%. So the bigger our project gets, the lower the rates are going to be. And that's something we would look forward to in the future. So that's page 12. We move on to page 13. Just some of the other costs that we can expect. You know, as the former mayor of New Bedford, who's on our planning board, just said, sewer projects cost a lot of money. And he actually lost his reelection bid because of a big sewer project in Fall River. But there are a lot of fees connected. Westport property owners will have to pay a system connection fee. Fall River imposes fees. It's a complicated formula, but it comes to $333 for water and $333 for sewer for each house. Now, the question is, what do we do? Do we move that up? We have had a suggestion that we add $2 to that, which would make a a one bedroom house $990. But if you have 3 bedrooms, it's more. And this is just so $990 for just sewer and $990 for water. That is the potential hookup cost that we would have for potential customers. And then we go to page 14. I'm going to pass this back to Roger, but we have a lot of permitting going on. We have a lot of dates to look at, and he's going to go through these quickly.
Thanks, Murray. So there's a lot that's been going on, to put it mildly. The project has been put on the fast track for some reasons that we can certainly discuss. And the good news is that the project is tracking on time, and that means that we will have we project to have all the permits and full design in place prior to town meeting, and actually a bid in hand prior to town meeting. And so what I'm saying is that the prior going into town meeting, the residents of Westport will know exactly what this project is going to cost based on the bid. That does not mean the project will be under contract. That contract award would only come after the town meeting has approved the debt exclusion, and subsequently the Board of Selectmen enter into contract with the prospective contractor. So, but all the stars are aligning so that we would be in a position to give an exact value going into that town meeting. We won't have that prior to the April ballot vote. And I think it's important to state, so I think it'd be important to say why. I mean, one of the questions is why wouldn't we have be further along? So there's a couple of constraints that we're working with, and one of those is the state funding cycle and the grants. And in addition to all that, of course, in January, after looking at the project and doing all the analysis, the decision was made to move the full project forward instead of segmenting it. So when you consider the state funding schedule, for example, the IUP through the SRF, we just received word. We saw that the SRF draft IUP was issued in January, and Monday we spoke with the folks at the state, and they notified us that at least the first contract, which was initially submitted as part of the SRF application, is in play for low interest funding. So those sort of constraints have sort of driven the schedule. And I can tell you, having done this for a little while, that it's been yeoman's work just to have this project in a position where it's fully permitted and ready for bid before town meeting. So I guess that's a long way of saying the schedule that you see in front of you are some of the sort of remaining hurdles. And you will notice that the last line, BOS signed contract with contractor, takes place after town meeting, but everything prior to that has us completing what's necessary in terms of process to advance the project by the second week in hopefully in May.
Okay, so page 15. we are, we've got two big dates here. We've got April 9th, which is the town election, and we have a ballot vote for the debt exclusion approval. And then May 9th, which is the town meeting. And we've got, several warrants on there. I haven't seen the latest language. The Board of Selectmen finalized the language just last night. I haven't seen it. Perhaps you all have. But I don't know. We've got quite a number of issues there. I don't know how they put them into various warrants and package and paragraphs. But anyhow, we do have, a lot of work to do in the next couple of months. And we are here tonight before the Finance Committee looking for your recommendation. We do have a lot of support in town. The Select Board has unanimously supported the ballot question and the warrant articles at town meeting. But all along, the Board of Selectmen has approved funding for this project. And the project really came out of the Planning Board, and they wholeheartedly support it. And they had a letter. They have a letter of support appearing in the Shorelines this week. The Board of Health, interested in clean water, also supports that. You might have seen their letter of support in the Shorelines last week. And of course, the Infrastructure Oversight Committee is here tonight supporting. We aren't alone. We do have environmental organizations supporting it. Again, this is for cleaning up the pollutants in the Westport River, but our own Westport River Watershed Alliance is fully behind it, and they are working very closely with the Buzzards Bay Coalition to help us get the word out and to help us with our outreach. And we have state organizations, SERPID, in a 2018 report, as we mentioned before, supports this, and the DEP with the low-cost state revolving fund is now supporting us. And we've done a lot of outreach. There's been IOC meetings up in the middle school, and then we're doing one tomorrow at the Macomber School. This is to get the meetings up to the north end, which is where this project is going to impact the most. And we've got other meetings coming up. You're going to see yard signs. You're going to see mailings. And so there's going to be quite a push on from now. What's really already started as we go forward to the ballot box on April 9th and town meeting on May 9th. So that's it. I know there are questions. Al, you probably want to start the questions.
1 second, Al, before, 1 second. So
And you.
go ahead. I wanted to, before we got into some of the specifics, I wanted to ask the committee for really a higher level overview of, we talk about the project, and the project that we're talking about now for the $35 million is very specific to the trunk line on Route 6.
Yeah.
What I haven't heard us talk about, and I'd like to understand, that's not the complete cost to the project, right? So we keep referring everything to the project, but what's the total cost? What's the total project going to be, right? The trunk line is a first phase of the project, and then there'll be other elements. So what I'd like to understand is what's the total cost that the town is looking to incur for the water and sewer as a complete project, not just this trunk line.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. The Route 6 is just a trunk line. It does not go into neighborhoods. If it needs a justification, number one, it's an economic development justification. But also, we need the trunk line before we can get into the neighborhoods. We got to crawl before we walk. So that's 35 million. Actually, Friday's estimate was 34, but we've built a $1 million buffer into that. After that, do the whole corridor up there with 1,000 or 2,000 homes. I hear Bob Diller doubling that number. Bob is the vice chair of our committee. He's on the planning board. He has been in water sewer projects for probably 50 years, and that's why we wanted him on tonight, because he has an incredible depth of experience in this that none of us have. but he's mentioned 65 million for the whole project. I will say this, that we do have one neighborhood. We're trying to focus on Route 6 and try to keep our blinders on Route 6, but we have been working on this PFAS grant, which would take a water line from the trunk line up Osborne Street to the McNamara School, and then down Gifford Road down to back to Route 6. This we call the McNamara Loop. Water engineers like loops because it keeps the water moving and it keeps it from stagnating. And so if we get this $4 million, it will build a couple $1 million extension of the water line on Route 6, and then the couple $1 million loop on those roads. And we would add sewer at the same time. So that's the first project we would go off of Route 6 with. And we hope to get a $4 million grant that might be half the cost of the whole thing.
Great, thanks. So just to thank you for that. So in terms of, so the trunk line itself, which we're talking about now, is the 35 million.
Yeah.
If you know, assuming it's double or 65 million, when would you anticipate that work to start? Is that 3 years from now, 10 years from now? What would be the next phase of when the next cost would come in for the town residents to have to pay?
Well, people like Danny Soares, who's on our committee, Board of Selectmen, he's dug a lot of dirt in his career, and he thinks we can do the trunk line in a year or two. If we get the money, we've got to get the money. We've got to get the authorization. And then we can start going into other neighborhoods. So I would say 1 to 2 years. That's optimistic, but we need the authorization for the money.
We also have to have the authorization of the people living on the streets that they want it, on the side streets and whatnot, that there's a need and a want.
Yeah.
Correct.
That is the biggest question of all.
Yep.
All right, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the Finance Committee for questions. Al, you had your first hand, so I'm going to take you, and then Hugh, you'll be next. Thank you.
Defer Elder Hugh Morton, and then I'll follow up or add to it.
Okay, well, thank you. I was going to defer to you, Al, as the first person in line.
It's a
As I understand this, and put all the stuff about environmental, et cetera, to the side, we're talking about a debt service of roughly $2 million a year. But forget betterments, that goes to the individuals. So this is town payment out of taxes with an estimated increase in possible revenue from the improved properties of maybe 500,000 a year. That doesn't sound like a very good bargain to begin with.
Hugh, that's only for the first mile. We've got a 5-mile stretch of Route 6.
And it's all guesswork and pie in the sky.
Forecasting.
Let me finish my questions, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Also going to have, I'm not opposed to it per se, but you're going to have a town-wide election on April 9th, asking people to vote for a pig in the poke. Because as you say, all the figures that you have about grants and this and that and grant, all guesswork. Now, I don't say they're wrong. I'm saying only that I'm very surprised that the vote comes before the town meeting vote, when things normally would be explored, and the townspeople in that forum would take a stand. I suspect the calendar is the reason you're putting the cart before the horse. And I'm not being critical. I'm saying simply that it seems to me that makes your task a great deal harder, because I think people will be asking the question I just asked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure you're going to save any money for the abutters. If you're saying it's going to cost the abutters maybe 15,000, 30,000 to tie in, they can improve their septic systems as they now exist for somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe. So, yeah, it's more reliable, it's this and that, but still. And finally, I guess I wouldn't consider the extension of the Marriott as doing much of anything. It's simply an extension of the Hampton Inn owned by the France company. It's not an indication of somebody who wishes to come into town and build a new brand new commercial space. And I guess I'll stop with that for the moment.
Hugh, are those questions or are those statements?
Yeah, there are questions. I mean, I don't see how it's comments more than questions, I guess.
Okay, well,
Um,
I'll start with the, trying to predict the future. I was a securities analyst for 40 years. And what I did was forecast earnings, going out 1, 2, 3 years. And financial forecasting is tough. There are a lot of variables. There are unknowns. And what you have to do is come up with your best estimate. They're estimates based upon certain parameters and there's linear aspects, but they are financial forecasts. And, with financial forecasts, we just do the best we can.
I understand that they're difficult to do, but that raises the question of how reliable they are for just the reasons that you indicate.
Well, that's a good question. And, I just have to say we do our best.
Now, I think it's Al's turn at this point.
Yeah. Huh?
Go ahead, Al. Thank
Oh.
you, Hugh.
Yep.
I have so many questions about this. My head is exploding. So let me just start off
Residents.
by suggesting a few questions, comments, and hoping for some answers. I watched 3 times the infrastructure committee meeting on YouTube, which of course lets you know how little I have to do in my day to be able to do this. And at the beginning of the meeting, and we've had consultants for a year, 2.5, whatever the time is, talking about, pardon me, a phased project. By the end of the meeting, we conflated all 3 projects into one large project. Number 2, what we did was we went from 8.5 and 15 or 16 million, whatever the number is, to $7 or $8 million to 31.5 million. And then Manny got up and said, "Hey, let's throw in $30 million." Then we went to then we took this and took it from a trunk line on Route 6 to, I think it's in the Warren, it could be wrong, to the greater Route 6 area. And I'm just trying to figure out who's really, pushing the buttons here, because it just goes to me from, well, let's do this, let's do that, let's don't do this, let's do that, let's throw on a few more $1 million. We don't know how many people are going to sign up. We also haven't added into this mix the fact that if a person decides to tie into the water and sewer system, they also have an additional cost of filling their septic system, for example, or cesspool, with sand, drilling holes in, probably another $5,000 or $6,000, and people don't have that kind of money to do it. So I'm just saying that it just seems as though we are rushing to judgment on this. I don't know why. It could happen a year or 2 from now, but I don't believe that we have all of the relevant information to make this decision in the next 90 days. It's all of a sudden, it just, for you guys in the committee, it didn't pop up. I mean, you've been living it, it's like chewing cereal every day, right? I mean, you wake up every morning and think about it. But for the rest of us,
20 years.
there's a lot of 20 years. Okay. So I just think that there's pieces of the puzzle,
Go to the residents.
unintended consequences,
Has anybody
that
told the
really
residents?
doesn't that we need answers for. Okay, so that's one of my points. I've got a few more, but I'm gonna defer the floor to somebody else that's has some other questions.
Steve, you want to reply to Al?
Sure.
Probably not.
I think we explained why No, I think we kind of explained why we needed to rush it, because the funding's available now. And the opportunity was here now. But we have plenty of businesses coming to us that say, you get infrastructure, will come here. Nobody will lock in without us having infrastructure. So we need to have, don't forget about the environmental issue too, that the state was going to force this on us, forcing everybody to have the $30,000 septic system if we didn't have options. Yes, I agree. I can't argue the fact that it's not being kind of rushed. Murray was on the team that did it 20 years ago. It was a different thinking back then. We had more mom and pop stores. Mom and pop is sold out to out of towners, if you will. There isn't the connection that there was to other stores. They're looking for other options. During COVID, people wanted to be able to walk around and go to shops and whatnot. That part of the overall design will be to improve Route 6 walkability. At least for me, I'd love to be able to walk up Route 6 and go to more businesses and whatnot. So again, I can't stress it enough. We have people's failing systems. We have people that will come to us on the side and say, "Hey, I'm drinking my neighbor's sewer, but I don't want to say anything. It'll destroy my home value." Unfortunately, there was one person at the meeting that stood up and said that he has contamination. But people on these side streets are scared. They don't want their properties destroyed. We're trying to bring it forward without, I don't want to say the evidence, but we don't have a whole lot of people standing up for it. We're going to find out at the election. You're probably going to find out who really needs this and who wants to go forward. Yes, it's going to be a tough sell, but at least we'll have a base of people that really need it, and you'll have a better understanding that can't go to the public and say, my well's ruined, because their property value is going to plummet. So that's the people we're stressing for. I'm stressing for more economic development. Again, I personally like to see a walkable community. Don't forget, the north end toward White's Restaurant is within the perimeter of the rail, forcing us to have more dense development in that area, something we don't have a choice on. I'm trying not to talk too fast, but keep in mind, we have the septic that was going to thrown at us from the state. We have a deeper density housing that was going to be thrown at us by the state. Right now, we've got a delay on both. We've got lucky. It would have been a tremendous impact to the north end. With a little water and sewer will help us to get that done. It'll help our businesses down the line. Anybody that has a restaurant in town knows they have problem with their wells testing. People that went public before, it's further south, but I mean, Handy Hill wanted to expand, and he said he has well problems. He can't do that. He was public. So I'm just trying to touch base on a few of the things, just so you understand where we're coming from. There's the need. It's just trying to get everybody to understand. And yes, I agree. It's not going to be cheap, and it's only going to get more expensive. And again, the seed money was there. We had Mike and Paul working for it, so we had stuff pushed forward, and grants. I don't know what else you want me to answer. I'd be happy to elaborate more, but I don't want to carry.
Could I just give a quick follow up, and then I will be quiet. Steve, I get it completely. I'm not negative at all about the need in the neighborhoods. I truly am not. That's not the point. The point is that I think that it's being sold as a bigger project than it really is. 35 mil is not going to do what the warrant issue is calling for. We're looking at 3 to 4 times as much. So I get it completely, but I just simply don't think that we have looked at the full impact of not just the greater Route 6 area, and I'll be dead before this ever happens. So at least I don't need to worry about it. But I think the bigger plan is to go down Gifford Road, hook up routes 177, so on and so forth. And I'm not, opposed or agreeing with it. I'm just saying that there's a bigger long-term plan, and that's okay. But right now, we have what we're selling is a $35 million project for a trunk line down Route 6, but yet the warrant calls for it to be in the greater Route 6 area, which is, I think, disingenuous. That's all I'm, that's all I'm saying.
Just a very quick follow-up, Madam Chair. Yes, we have the same concern. I won't speak for Murray, but we were planning on going with contract one, which is to 88 baby steps. And if you saw the meeting, you saw like 100 people. The businesses all showed up and said, we want it all, or we're not supporting it, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, blah, blah. That sounds ignorant, but they elaborated from there. Again, our main focus was the trunk line. One of the, it's no secret, Manny wants to expand it. Originally, when the water line came down, we talked about a loop going to Macumber many years ago. So the school would be all set. Right. And that didn't go. We couldn't afford it, etc. This time the money's there. So I see where he's going with it. But yes, he states it right at the meetings that he wants to expand it down Sylvania and whatnot. That, in my personal opinion, is that would be what the people want, not what we're going to force on them. Again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I support the trunk. We have not taken a vote to go up to Macumber yet. We're waiting to see come up with the funds. But again, I got to tip my hat to Murray, because they've already got $4,000 toward that, which will help us.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. I'm done. And thanks for your comments. It's just my concern that it's we had a good project in our hands that I think made sense, and then all of a sudden it just kind of blew up. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Go ahead, Cindy, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. So I want to look at this really from the resident standpoint, and I will preface this by saying, number one, I grew up directly on Route 6. Obviously many years ago. I will tell you, even back then, I'm retired now, so this was more than 60 years ago. When I drank a glass of water when I was a kid, it tasted like a glass of nails, so rusty nails. And that was then. I can only imagine what that water would taste like today. So I understand the need. I support conceptually the project wholeheartedly. I think it's important. But I would like to address this from the resident standpoint. So on the trunk line, those homes and businesses that are impacted, could someone that lives, I'm going to pick a number, 726 State Road, contact someone right now at some location and find out exactly what their cost will be? Can you provide numbers individually to homeowners so that they could say, look, I've got a large property, I've got a multifamily unit here, I've got a double decker. Some of those homes on Route 6 do have multiple units, many do not. But could they contact someone either in the assessor's office, the Board of Health? I know we don't have a water and sewer commission, but is there someone there could go saying, this is my property, tell me how much this is going to cost me individually?
Roger would be the
Roger and I have been trying to answer that question, and the betterment paid over 20 years is going to be 10,000 max. It'll probably come in more like 9 or even less. We put a stub in front of a house. The house owner will have to dig up his yard, get a plumber in, and that's $5,000. I've heard as an estimate from an engineer, and that's the case because the configuration of the plumbing in somebody's basement usually goes to the backyard where the cesspool is. It's got to be reconfigured to come out toward the street where the water and sewer is. And so that would be another cost, but that would be a private cost. And then there's the hookup, because Fall River will charge, for water and for sewer, $333, $330 for each. And then for our own O&M costs, we might have to add to that by one time or 2 times. So that would be maybe a couple thousand more. So betterment over 20 years.
But how about their annual, usage cost and getting back to the betterment fee, regardless, will everyone on the trunk line be required to hook in, or is that still an option? If you're on the trunk line, if you're on Route 6, will you be required to hook in?
If a house has a legal good Title V, we cannot force them.
Okay, so if they don't have a
If
good
they have a failed system or they have a cesspool, which is almost failed by definition, and they want to sell the house, they've got a problem because they can't unless they put in a Title V or they tie in. And a new Title V is going to cost $35,000, and our sewer would be cheaper, to be honest.
Right. I mean, given that the payment of the betterment is over time, and I would assume a lien, if that home is sold while the lien is outstanding, is it fully payable at the time of sale?
I don't know. I do know that the betterment is a lien and it's on the property, not the owner. But maybe at the sale of the house, it has to be paid off. I actually don't know that. That's a good question for the assessor. Steve, do you
Okay.
know?
Generally speaking, yes, they do pay those off at time of sale.
We have our treasurer on. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So just one last point. So, Steve, you had mentioned, and this is for, the future, and I think that there's been a lot of fear from what I can tell, just going through social media, a lot of fear that people in those feeder neighborhoods are fearful that they will be required to hook in as well. So in those neighborhoods, as you said, if they do get expanded, I've forgotten the names of some of the streets, Arlington Street or whatever, Maple, some of those feeder streets, you said that it would have to be approved by the people on the street before it would be forced upon them. So
That's what I would certainly back up. Yeah, you're going to be going up somebody's street. Let me give you an example. I have no gas coming to my house, natural gas. The previous owner didn't want to go and buy his property. So it stops 100 feet up the road and 100 feet down the road. To make a long story short, I was going to make arrangements to get gas when I first bought the house. They said they'd do it for free if I went to all gas. And the Healy thing happened, and they said, we don't want anything to do with Westport anymore. It's going to cost you $4,000. So it would behoove you to have the betterment going by your house, pay the betterment,
Right.
even if you don't hook up, as a selling point. If you've got a good, like Murray said, you can say no, you're going to have a straight pipe going through it. It's going to cost you a lot of money down the line to tie in. Does that make
Right.
it clear?
Yeah. As long as I understand that there is some process by which, the residents in a neighborhood, I mean, obviously the plan hasn't been crafted yet, but I mean, is it a majority? Majority rules whether you're going to go from one end to the other. If the person at the end of Arlington Street wants it and no one else does, do you go in, or do you, will you need a majority? I know that those, I don't expect an answer on that, but those are some of the things I guess you would have to look at. But I think there's just a lot of fear out there and a lot of unknown, certainly about the numbers, which makes this a very difficult decision, particularly when you're looking at money that's available to you today. This project is so long overdue for many of the residents there. As you said, for the
Yeah.
fail systems and whatnot, but they need more accurate information to be able to make a good decision. I mean, I think, we as a finance committee are looking for, good information to make a good, a good recommendation one way or the other. So it's hard. I know you guys have been under the gun, and perhaps between now and election day, and certainly between now and town meeting day, you'll be able to have a better plan so that residents can actually go somewhere to know, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me, or this is the estimate for me. I don't care about this whole big project. For me, how much is this going to cost me and my family to have this? Because it will be a good deal for them in the long run. I mean, even though they're going to have to pay high prices for water and for sewer, these fail systems and the poor quality of the water, their children get sick, the people get sick. They need to get this done. I mean, it's long overdue.
Just very briefly, the problem is on sewer, you can't have just sewer. There's no meter on your sewer line.
Right.
You have to have water. That's
Right,
how
because
they
that's how
meter
it's
it.
gauged. Right, correct. I get
Right.
that.
So unfortunately, yeah, that's how they get you. But just think about, I mean, main proposal is to do the Macumber Loop because it addresses the school. Think about where it starts. It starts past Sanford Road to the Fall River line. We're not addressing Hebert Terrace. Borden Street had said they want it for the new housing, so that's probably a go. But you've got to get a feel for the neighborhood. We got to replenish the fund, and the only way you're going to do that is through the betterment as we go by and have subs put out. So that's how we're going to keep the project moving. But no, this is just the main thing is the trunk. And yes, if you have a stub, you're going to have a betterment. That's what we've said since pretty much since day one. The selectmen have said they're not going to force it on anybody. And that's how you would go down 6, which is the main objective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Duncan, you've got your hand up next.
You're on mute, Duncan.
Right here. Yeah, just briefly, I guess I have one question and a couple of observations. The question is, what happens if it's voted down? So I'd love to hear that answer. I've read through the warrant, I've read through the details, and I think it's a very exciting future for the town of Westport. I'm a newbie on the finance committee, but I will tell you this. I'm just struck as a newbie and an outsider at kind of the lack of vision. I mean, we are consistently in a position of this vote, this week, this month, this year, and you know we've voted down 15 overrides or more, and you know we're not thinking generationally here. You know, we built a new high school. You know, these projects are what's going to prop up property values and increase revenue to the town. The new high school is the same thing. When we get all our kids to go to that high school and not go elsewhere, then we're going to prop up and increase property values. So I guess I'm just struck by the situation here where, you know, I don't understand how, given the fact that we got just blown out on the override, that we think that this debt exclusion is going to pass. So curious for anybody's input on that.
Yeah, so Duncan, let me just say something about overrides versus debt exclusions. They're different. An override is forever, and an override goes into the, you know, the massive bureaucracy of the town. In contrast, the debt exclusion is for one project and it's for 20 years. It's finite. It's not forever. And I think if you look at the history, overrides fail and debt exclusions pass. The school was a debt exclusion. The fire department was a debt exclusion. The police department was a debt exclusion. And Diamond was a debt exclusion. And I want to answer your first question with the example of Diamond, because Diamond failed at the ballot box, passed at the town meeting, went back to the ballot box and passed. So what happens if we fail at the ballot? We take it to town meeting and then we go back to the ballot box.
Well, I'm encouraged by that, and I'm familiar with it. I brought my family up in the town of Westwood, and you know, and we passed both debt exclusions and overrides. But I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about, you know, what I see in the voting you know, process in this town, and particularly in that area of town. And I'm concerned that, you know, we're going to be in a position where we're not supporting a longer term vision for the economic health of Westport. And I'm very concerned about that.
Well, we try.
I'd just like
We
to
try.
add.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I'd just like to add, we do have a neighborhood meeting like we spoke of tomorrow. I wish this meeting that we're having tonight was the day after, so we could have public input. It's the second big meeting we're having, and we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. I'm sure people are going to have the same have a better feeling. Hopefully more people will speak up that they really need it and say why. And when people see their faces and understand that who it's affecting, it'll help. Because again, as I said earlier, people don't understand how deep it goes. Cindy touched base on it a little, that yeah, there is water issues, but nobody really wants to address it.
Thank you. I think that's unknown, but I think that's Gary. Is that you, Gary? Hi, Gary.
Yes. Hey, so I haven't listened to a lot of this conversation. Having worked in a few communities that implemented water and sewer. You know, we talk about the difference between commercial and residential. Unfortunately, the residents can't pass those costs on to anyone but themselves. I mean, the hotel can pass it on to any traveler that's coming in. You know, they jack up the room rates. A restaurant can, you know, split that out amongst meal costs. So it'd be really interesting to know. And if it hasn't been done, I know you have the public meetings, but was a survey sent around to the residents that would be affected? Would it be too late to do that? Because having, as I said, worked in these communities, you go from a $35 million project to a $100 million project in the matter of 5 years. And this is a very expensive endeavor. Coming off the heels of a brand new school, a brand new police station, a brand new fire department, how much more do we ask the residents, and record inflation? How much more do we ask the residents, particularly in that area, to divvy up another $200 to $500 a year? How do we justify that? I understand clean water is important, and we haven't even talked about the farming. How do we implement that to farmers who saw decreased revenues themselves? So, on the surface, it's a great idea and a great endeavor, but it is a very costly one, way beyond $35 million, way beyond that.
Yep.
And I know we want to be somewhat proactive. We want to be somewhat aggressive. The residents really need to know that this isn't just going to be, a small bill. In fact, most of the communities, some of the bills outstrip their real estate tax. And the biggest delinquency that you see in most communities is their water and sewer bills. So, I think this is something that really needs to be explored, maybe a little bit more. And not just rush through as far as us going out for borrowings and saying we're going to get grants and this and that. That's great, but it's just not, it's very costly. Very, very costly.
Thank you, Gary. Jim?
Yes, thank you. I've kind of been listening. I just want to point out a couple of things. That the $35 million in the debt exclusion is strictly for Route 6. That's all that $35 million is going to cover. While the article may say greater Route 6, there's no money to do that. So we're looking strictly at the trunk line and the water line in Route 6. And even if we started construction this year, you're looking at a 2-3 year project. By the time people start tying in, it could be 4 or 5 years. This doesn't happen overnight. We've seen some of the neighboring communities, Dartmouth, for example, Tiverton, Freetown, where they've expanded sewer, and it takes time. Tiverton they've had their sewer in for a number of years, and every 5 or 6 years they try to expand it into a different neighborhood. So they'll go into that neighborhood, they'll poll the people in that neighborhood, they'll do a survey, and if there's enough people that are interested in doing it, they'll extend into that neighborhood. But it takes time to get into that neighborhood. I think the one benefit of saying greater Route 6 area is if when you're going down Route 6 and we're stubbing all the side streets, which we're going to do anyway, if you have to extend it an extra 50 feet to pick up a multifamily house or something that is having trouble with their water, that might be something we can do. But the $35 million is only going to cover Route 6. It's not going to go anymore. I also strongly believe at some point we're going to have sewer down Route 6. It might be 10 years, it might be 50 years. Hopefully it's next year, but at some point we're going to have it. So if we're going to have it at some point, why don't we put it in sooner so we can take advantage of those years in between? It's the sooner we get in, the less septic systems you're putting in, the less nitrogen going in the ground. It doesn't make sense. I realize may not have the money. Many don't. I can tell from other communities when properties are going for sale, when people are buying properties, it's advantageous to have sewer and water. It increases the property value. And I'm sure somebody's going to give me an example as soon as I say this, but I'm not aware of a community that has regretted putting in water and sewer. The only regret I've heard is that it increased the commercial base too much. But beyond that, people have had good experiences putting in water and sewer. And if we don't get the trunk line in, really nothing's going to go in because, that's step one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Couldn't agree.
Thanks, Jim. Before we move on, I just wanted to make a comment also. I'm generally in support of the water and sewer project as a whole. But I do raise concerns that we haven't really talked comprehensively of this plan. And when I hear that obviously this plan is the trunk line only, and that's the 35 million, I haven't heard that that's been communicated to the residents. So I haven't heard or seen in any frequently asked questions or any documentation that the project is a lot larger than 35 million. So I think there's anybody who's listening is hearing 35 million and they think that's the project. And when you have identified, as you did, a $600,000 home, that equates to $250 per year. That's what people are hearing. Then you need to tell them that that's only a piece, that it's double or triple that. And that's my concern, that I have not heard that. I have not seen that in any documentation on anything. And so I really have concern that this is too soon to be asking for debt exclusion on a project that hasn't fully been explained or to the general public.
I agree with you 100%, Karen, and that was my point. You know, as I mentioned, these projects turn into mega $1 million projects, and it is quite dishonest. I think not dishonest, but we're not being as transparent as we should be to tell residents, okay, it's going to be $250 this year, but in year 3, your bill's not going to go up to $400 or $500, or we may branch out to different areas of the town that increases the cost. You know, and is the capacity there? Also, the other question is, what companies that we're saying we have a need for on Route 6, we have a need to bring in water and sewer to Route 6. What companies have approached the town that say, we want to approach the town, but we're not coming because there's no water and sewer infrastructure? Does that list exist?
Yeah, let me just comment. I did forward to Karen 5 letters of support. And I assume that she distributed those to FinCom. Is that correct? Okay, so.
But I guess my question is, which companies non-existing are approaching the town saying that they're not coming to Westport because we do not have a water sewer infrastructure? Do we have a list?
No, hang on, Murray. Let me say it.
Yeah, 4.
Murray, let me say it, please. No, I have a list, and no, just like you see any project in the area, they don't release. They absolutely do not want it released. I've had government come ask us about it. I've had companies, but like Murray says, you got a couple of letters. The plastic company wants to go on the end near Forge Road. But no, when they're poking around, they don't want it to be released, because what happens is if they're looking for an area, the property goes up, 3 and 4 times. Look what happened at CES. The housings that were $200,000 houses all of a sudden wouldn't sell for less than 5. They held up the project. So most companies will come in, they kind of do it on the side, say, hey, will this go? They try to go before some boards like Concom will have people go before them a lot, and they won't commit until they see plans, and plans don't get drawn up. They don't want to spend that money until we have the infrastructure. So no, you're not going to see a long list, but there are some that did put it in writing. Some housing and the plastic company wants to go at the end, and I will tell you, Mr. Saws is suggesting we put APR on that property so we have some saved land. He has put that in writing to me, so I'll just give you a head up on that.
Thanks, Steve. Christopher, you've got your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So full disclosure here, I am the FinCom representative to the Infrastructure Oversight Committee. Just recently got on board to this. But there's a couple of points here that I think is really important to consider. I understand the concern that, or the perception that this has been very quickly developed and is being presented very in a very tight window of time. That being said, I have heard time and time on this committee a question, or rather a prayer, if you will, for additional revenue to come into the town. And to me, this project is the single most important project that the town can work on in terms of potential economic development, potential increases in property values, and therefore increases in tax revenue, as well as taking care of a train that's coming down the tracks in terms of continued issues with septics, with the cesspool issues. The regulations that were proposed last year, they're not going away. They're going to come back again and again. And I I understand some of the questions regarding the timing of this, but I think that again, this is the single most important project I think that the town has to actually increase revenue, and I think the not only that, but the betterment policy I think that's been discussed is a very, very fair way to implement this. I think there is definitely more work to be done as far as informing the public in the next little while, and hopefully we can the committee and others can work towards that effort. But the bottom line is, if Westport is to be able to sustain not only its budgets in general, but just to be able to utilize the space that on Route 6 specifically, that is, if the town is going to be able to better utilize this space that has been consistently underutilized for decades, I think we really have to consider this as a project that's worthwhile to support. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. That's very, Hugh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask a really technical question. I assumed that the vote of the town in April was because things were lapsing and so forth. But in response to Duncan's question, I think Maury said that if it didn't pass in April, then it could be a later vote after the town meeting. And that strikes me as, why not wait until after the town meeting when everything is trashed out, et cetera? And my question about asking people to vote in favor of something that is still being developed, I think is likely not to pass. Did I miss something?
We did it for timing. We can save quite a number of months by putting the cart before the horse, as somebody said.
Yeah, well, but if you put the cart before the horse and it doesn't pass,
Yes.
you then go to town meeting, you now have a spoiled project. Assuming town meeting has the believers and therefore it passes, it comes around again after being rejected once. I mean, anything can happen, but it doesn't seem to be that improves your chances, rather than having a vote in whenever after town meeting when it's been thrashed out and presumably has a positive vote from town meeting. It's a tactical question, but it seems to me it's a concerning one.
And it's a good question. And the only model we really have is the Diamond model that I referenced earlier. But
Diamond was a mistake. People knew, and nobody said anything about it, and people were not voting with any knowledge. I understand you're saying that happened, but that was a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah. Okay.
So Hugh, if I could just answer that on the process, right? If we have it before town meeting, obviously town meeting approves the appropriation and it's approved at the ballot, the money's available. If we approve it at town meeting contingent and we want a ballot question after, we'd be required to have the ballot question another election prior to September 15th. We could not do it at the same time as the preliminary federal election, so we'd have to have a special election in the summer. We already have 4 elections this year. Everything is running into each other now with the early voting and the absentee voting and the mail-in voting. It's just not practical for the town to have another election later on in the summer. So that's
an interesting point. I was just saying, though, as I said before, that as a tactical matter, putting aside the practical sides of other elections, et cetera, it seems to me you're taking a very big step to ask people to approve the spending of millions and millions of dollars without really knowing what the project is by then. But that's okay. I understand why you said that.
fair enough.
Madam Chair, can I just add?
Oh.
Can I just add very briefly in the chat that Jim posted is the new page that's on the Westport site, and the fact page is really good. It answers a lot of the questions. It's just going out now, obviously, but it'll answer a lot of your questions in writing.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Susan Brayton, you've got your hand up.
We were talking way back. I mentioned that one of the properties that was looking at or hoping to have the sewer and water put in is considering putting in a 50-unit apartment, not the Edgewater, but one further down.
Yes.
That is, I'm not opposed to housing. We certainly need it. However, we got to keep in mind that kind of project can actually cost the town more money. The schools, I'm assuming the Edgewater is 55 plus. If this isn't a
Yes.
55 plus or something, and there's children there, we could end up with a lot more expense for students in the schools in addition to that.
Yes. Well, it's true. I'm not going to say that it's not, Sue. But David Oliveira of Monaco Investments and Divine Enterprises bought that property for a couple $1 million. He found no sewer there, so he just refurbished the existing units of the old motel. He's got them rented. He's got a little cash flow coming, positive cash flow. But his long-range plan would be to put 55 units in there in a new building. And of course, to do that, he would need sewer. Also, he complains about the septic system that he has now. It's apparently combined with the Portas de Ciudad restaurant, and he'd like to de-link from that. So, but you're right. It's not a senior 55 or above project like the third Edgewater Tower would be.
Right.
And there might be kids in our schools. That's true.
It would be.
Yep.
Would those units, I'll just ask a quick question, would those units qualify us for the dense housing that would be required for the rail?
I would assume, because it's in that northwest corridor, that first mile of Route 6.
Okay.
Yes, it's within the circle, if you will, of the impact area. They
Yeah.
wanted to make it a lot more dense housing on some very small lots, and that was even a bigger concern about sewer with little lots.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Al. And then after Al, I have a couple of questions I've been trying to let you all cycle through. So go ahead, Al.
I'll make it brief, but based on what we were just discussing, my question becomes, who's really driving the train here? Is it the state or is it the town? It bothers me when it's not the town and it's the state. That's comment number one. Number two is that I agree with Gary's comments completely as far as this whole infrastructure and the complications, if you will. I would also like to add, and I'll make it extremely brief. We also, as a finance committee, as in a town, have a lot of other financial issues coming over our transom. This is 35 million, probably will end up being 100 million. We've got an old school that needs to be a new school. We need to have a new fire truck. I mean, there's Diamond. You go on and on and on down the list, and we need to balance this to be able to and not look at everything as a discrete, property. That's the wrong word, but a discrete component of the total whole. And we have a lot of stuff going on, and it will be going on in the next 5 years. So we need to look at the return on investment of, all of this stuff to make sure that all of a sudden the taxpayers in the town don't get buried.
You froze, Al.
Anyway.
He's frozen.
Yeah.
he's
So
frozen.
Al, just you want to know who's driving this project? In the last 5 or 6 years, it's been our elected planning board that is driving the project. But ultimately, water and sewer commissioners are the board of selectmen, and so the select board is now driving the project, and the board of health is on board. All those are elected officials of the town of Westport.
All right, so Maury, I'm just going to make a follow-up, and then I'm going to defer to Karen. When I was listening to the last meeting, if you will, Jim Whiten came up, and maybe he misspoke, and we all have. I mean, I'm not excluding myself from this. He said that the added tax revenue for the town of Westport would be $60,000 a year. In other words, 600 grand over 10-year period of time. Well, that's a damn bad return on investment as far as
I just refer you to the December 2018 report from Serpide on the first mile, which is our contract one. I refer you to that. It's a lot more.
well, that
The mixed use scenario is something like $420,000 referred to in the presentation. That was 5 years ago. Take inflation into account, we're up to, $520,000 a year. And that's just for the first mile. Now we have a 5-mile section of Route 6. And my question is, can you triple that, quadruple that, quintuple that? I don't know, but that is all possible. And as Chris Thrasher said, this is the best economic development and tax revenue project we have in town right now.
I will defer.
Anything else, Al? You all set?
Nope, I'm good. I'm good.
All right, thank you. All right, so I have a couple of questions. So I'm trying to take it back again to thinking about our residents. So right now, the residents on Route 6 on the trunk line would be subject to a number of costs, which you partly put in your presentation. So I want to understand a little bit about the betterment. So I know you indicated that each EDU would be around $10,000. I also understand there's some zoning laws that are coming up on the town meeting that are looking to change the potential lot. So what might have been a 3-bedroom unit on a parcel could become 2 separate units, which then could mean that they would be subject to 2 EDUs and not 1, as an example.
A duplex would be 2 EDUs. A single family home would be 1 EDU.
Well, but my understanding, and you can help me out here, so it's not necessarily the current, if there's a 3-bedroom home, that's 1 EDU, but it's going to be when the zoning laws change, potentially that parcel of land could now be split into 2 parcels, which would mean that property owner would have 2 EDUs or 3, or depending on their property. Can you talk about that? Because I think those that are on Route 6 may be thinking it's 10,000, but it may be more than that with the zoning laws, which haven't talked about, but are going to impact the parcels.
Well, the planning board has 2 warrants. One is for the Gateway District, which is the area on that first contract area, that first mile, and the other is on the what is it called? The Science and Technology STOD, the Science and Technology Overlay District, where they're reducing the lot size for development. Jim Hartnett, can you help me here?
So right now, if there's a single family residential property dwelling on a lot, it's going to be assessed 1 EDU regardless of the size of that lot. If it's a vacant parcel, they will look at it differently and assess the value based on its potential, either for commercial or residential. So if you have a parcel that has the potential to be divided into a couple of lots, then it should be charged more than 1 EDU, right? Because the value with the new zoning went from 1 lot, whatever the value is at 100,000, to 2 or 3 lots, the value is now 300,000. So the EDU, I believe, goes with that increase in the number of lots. It's a little complicated because we're in a business district, so some of these properties are being looked at as a commercial property as opposed to residential. Roger has looked at this in more detail. Right now, we do have a spreadsheet with every property along Route 6, and there's an EDU number assigned to each one of those parcels. We're fine tuning it based on wetlands and a few other things, but it's very close to where the final number is going to be.
Karen, can I jump in to try to answer your question? Just
Thanks, Jen.
sure, just
Yeah, please do. Thank
I
you.
think one thing I don't want the committee to walk away with is thinking that these complex questions have not been thought about and answered, at least at the project level, in great detail. So with respect to the EDU calculations and the process by which those calculations are administered, there are stipulations that are already in place that are laid out by the Department of Local Services that tells us how we can assess properties and can assess properties. And there are, and that's also spelled out in the Mass General Laws, Chapter 83. So one thing that I think is important to take away is that on a project like this, there are a multitude of scenarios that could come up. So what happens is each individual town comes up with some base structures. We talked about some of the fees, we talked about connection fees, but at some point, once a fully authorized sewer commission is in place, then you would put into place a body that's authorized to advance rules and regulations. So that means that if a project were to come up and the type of project and expansion is outside of the DLS typical guidelines, then the rules and regulations adopted by the Empowered Sewer Commission would speak to those. So let me be more specific in terms. So you have a project that's $35 million. The folks along that corridor on either side are assessed the betterment, but hypothetically, some project 200 feet up a side road decides to run 200 feet of pipe and take advantage of that project. Well, in that particular case, the rules and regulations would assess what's referred to as an inflow fee. Now, wouldn't be tied into a betterment fee, but because you can't charge betterments and privilege fees to folks that are already bettered. So you would come up with a set of rules and regulations that would accommodate all these outliers. And so what I'm describing is not unique to Westport, but it's a process that's followed in every other community in the Commonwealth. So there are all these guidelines that exist. But I think Cindy did bring up a great question. So do we know what each property is going to be assessed? And the answer to that is yes. And so why hasn't that been advertised to this point? It's because the cost drivers associated with all of these, a lot of these we're just finding out. For example, if the SRF funding comes in and now we're looking at a low interest loan, we're able to recalculate a lot of these assessments based on a lower interest loan. It's a pretty substantial amount of money. And ultimately, as the project gets designed and the limits of the assessed properties gets better defined, then we're able to socialize those costs. So there is a great deal of detail, and I do understand sort of the frustration associated with not sort of seeing how the entire soup is made, but a lot of these things have been looked at in great detail and are available for review to the committee if you'd like.
So thank you, Roger. So I guess just my question again is, voters are going to the ballot in a few weeks.
Right.
And they don't even know. They don't have information to even know how much this is going to cost them, right? So the people that are off Route 6 that are in the next phase where their property is, they don't even know, is this 10,000, 20,000, 30,000? So we're asking people to vote on something that hasn't even been communicated to everyone so that they can make a valued decision based on that. So
Karen, we have a very active outreach program that we're cranking up. We're going to have our second IOC meeting tomorrow night in the North End. It's going to be in Macklemore. We've got a Watershed Alliance meeting. They're talking about April 6th. We've got a Westport Point Neighborhood Association meeting on March 16th. We're working with the WRWA and the Business Bay to try to continue the outreach. We've got articles coming out of Shorelines. Ted Hayes has been very, very good to us. And we have letters to the editor explaining things. Last week, we had a letter from the Board of Health, Phil Weinberg. This week, we're going to have a letter from the Planning Board, Jim Whiten. And we'll continue these weekly letters to the editor in the Shorelines. And we're going to have a mailing, and we're going to have yard signs, and we're going to do the best we can. If people want to listen, they can. If people don't want to listen, they don't have to. But all these meetings that we're having of the IOC, as well as this one tonight, I guess it's going to be on YouTube. And a lot of people have computers now, and a lot of people know YouTube, and all our meetings are on YouTube. So we're trying our hardest to get that information out there, Karen. We are, please believe me.
No, I appreciate that. And I think what's important for the people that are on Route 6, I think it's important that you itemize the costs, right? So we've talked about, and you have some of it in your presentation, where if it is one EDU, it's about $10,000. The water connection fee for a 3-bedroom house would be $990. The sewer connection fee for a 3-bedroom house would be $990. You've estimated that there would be a connection from the house to the trunk line, approximately $5,000, could be more.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's going to be Board of Health fees. I'm guessing there's going to be some sort of fees that someone might have to decommission their septic or do that. So I think it's important to itemize all those fees so that people understand that all the costs. But the other piece that you put in your presentation and didn't do a calculation, and I'd like for you to do the calculation for me, is for a typical 3-bedroom house, what would be the monthly or annual water and sewer usage fees?
Exactly.
That calculation can be done. The average citizen of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is estimated to use 57 gallons a day. And if you have a family of 4, that's a little over 200 gallons. And then you could, run it through the calculations that we gave on the water and sewer charges that we anticipate.
So Karen, based on the water usage, right, for single family, we're probably around, depending, some people water their lawns and so forth, but you're probably around $250, maybe $300 a year for water. The sewer rates, the sewer usage is based normally off the water usage. The sewer
Did you say a year, Jim?
Yes, and the sewer is a little bit more expensive, so you're probably looking in between $600 and $1,000 a year for water and sewer.
So
Based on
maybe
today's
someone
rates.
can help, so maybe someone can help that calculation, because
Yeah.
that's not exactly what I calculated. And so, again, I'm a math person and I can't very easily calculate what a usage is. And that's really very difficult for someone who's not even math oriented to try to figure out what their fee is going to be. So I think you owe it to people to give a really good example of what their fee is going to be. I'll tell you my numbers. So I looked at a 3-bedroom house under Title V. That's 110 gallons a day. So that's 330 gallons per bedroom, per day. So that comes to about 10,000 gallons a month. If I divide that by your 748.10, that comes to 13.36 CCFs times your $19.02, which is the combined water and sewer. I come out to $255 a month of what a water and sewer fee would be based on that.
So Karen, if tomorrow's presentation at the IOC, and I can pull it up now, I guess, if you like, we have an example of what an anticipated water and sewer fee would be. You just described Title V. Title V is a design approach versus what would ultimately be an estimated use approach. So Title V is a design, and so we don't anticipate that we're going to see 110 gallons per day per bedroom. So we could, we plan on presenting that particular question regarding anticipated fees at tomorrow's IOC meeting.
Great, thank you. I'd appreciate that. That would be important for the homeowners to understand all their costs. I don't have any other questions at the moment. So Hugh, go ahead.
Just a small comment. Maury was quoting some figures of anticipated revenues derived from some state agencies. I'd only say that state agencies who are promoting a project have a way of being optimistic about the results.
Okay.
Actually, is we did present that in slide 13, some of those anticipated costs on today's presentation.
Anybody that again wants to see the presentation, it's on that link that Jim posted, along with a lot of other information if you have any. And again, that's just going out there. We certainly hope that's going to help the public in figuring this out too, helping us move it along.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cindy.
I think in all fairness, if this were deferred by a year, 6 months, 9 months, these very same questions would be asked. I mean, we would still be using estimates because we wouldn't have hard costs then either, because we can't have hard costs until we can go to bid. We can't really do a lot of these things unless we have the thumbs up that the project is a go. So whether it's, in my original comment and certainly added to by Karen, I think your dissemination of information will be very important to this process. Having gone through the override process last year, it's very difficult to reach out overall to the town because we don't have a good overall communication system. The town website is wonky. It doesn't always work. We don't have a town-wide newspaper. We don't have, a local TV station that would deal with these matters. We have 2 different newspapers, and most people don't even read newspapers anymore. So dissemination of information is difficult, and I applaud your efforts to have localized meetings, particularly in those areas that are going to be most impacted. But I do think that it's not a question of time; it's a question of information. I mean, if we rolled this forward a year, we'd have the same questions. I mean, we would still have the same questions about costs. We would, and chances are it would all be more. So, I side with you in the urgency, but I'm still very concerned that people are going to walk into this blindly. And I used to have an old saying, I also used to be in the investment business. And if somebody needed an answer soon, the answer was always no. So if you have to have sufficient information to be able to make a good quality decision, and hopefully you do have time, and it looks like you've got resources to be able to get that information out, and I hope you are able to. But it is tough absent that dissemination of information and specific to each homeowner. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. And I'll reiterate that. So, the Finance Committee, as Christopher had mentioned, that we've talked about for years, we need a revenue generation revenue stream, and the development of Route 6 is our best estimate to be able to get potentially some additional revenues. So, and for environmental purposes, I'm in favor of the project as a whole. I'm just concerned of the information isn't quite all gelled together quite yet. But again, I applaud you all for all the efforts you've done over the last 20 years, Maury, trying to get
20 years. It's my last big shot. If we have to do another 20 years, I'll be 97 years old.
Okay, Karen, could I just add a couple of
Yeah,
small points just so you know?
Sure,
All right,
please.
so just so you know, there is a little bit of savings. We're leaving the stub there. They can get their own contractor to connect, which saves them money. We'd have to pay prevailing wage. Just so you know that. They did the same thing when they brought the water down initially. So just so you know on that, there is a little bit of savings. That's why we can't give you an exact number. If you don't know anybody with a backhoe, it's probably going to cost you $6-7 grand. If you know somebody, it's probably only going to cost you a couple of grand. And once they're in the neighborhood, you're going to get a better price. That's what happened when they ran the water. Hey, if you get your neighbor to do it too, you're going to save a couple of grand. So it's kind of out of the town's hands in that. Yes, we're going to have to inspect it, but you can get all kinds of deals as long as it's a licensed hoist operator. That's one of the reasons why we can't give a specific answer. Also, from day one, the businesses were told, here's a good shot. We're going to have a two-tier tax system when this is done, because it's going to help us financially for the town. That's the whole point of helping, I say you guys, but helping businesses move along. This is a good chance down the line. We're going to have a two-tier tax system to help the town out. We're helping you now. We're going to need you in the future. As far as expansion, I know you're all talking 100 million. I personally, again, I would ask the neighborhoods, but you know, I'm 1 out of 5, and even that might change in the future. So again, I'm very much for public input. We weren't afraid to go to the ballot. We found it as informative and trying to get it to the people, save the town money because it's already a ballot we're doing. Yes, I think nobody can deny the point that it is rushed. We agree 100%, and we're trying our best. Jim's at the office right now, 8:30 at night, putting in 12-hour days, not only on this, but helping us move this along. So I just wanted to throw that out to you. Two-tier tax wouldn't be out of the question in the future, and people connecting to the house, getting their own contractors is going to save them a couple of bucks, which they would not be able to do unless you know a septic person to do a septic for you. Another thing with septic too, especially I live on Maple Street, by the way, right off Route 6, is I have an acre property, so I have more room to put a septic, but look around and you'll see what we call the moon in some people's front yards, where it's a 4-foot rise in the front yards. If you go up Osborne Street where they're talking about that Macomb Loop, you'll see a couple of them. So I just wanted to throw that at you. I really appreciate all the questions, and I understand where you're coming from.
Thanks, Steve. And I just want to clarify one quick thing. You were just talking about a potential 2-tier tax rate, commercial rate versus residential. Just to clarify, if that were to ever happen, the town does not generate additional tax revenue. So that's really not, that won't help the town
Right.
in terms of anything. So I just
Yeah.
want to clarify your
You
point.
know-
So that's,
If I could, it won't help the overall tax base. It helps the residential people with a lower tax base because the business is paying more.
correct. It will not help the town in its finances, but yes, thank you.
But new growth would.
New growth, you.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, no,
Right, yes. Al, you have your hand up and then I think
First.
we're almost
ahead.
ready to.
oh, that's
Oh,
all
is
right.
there somebody else?
What I wanted to say is that just remember, Steve, in this, we not only have a ton of small businesses that are employing people in the town, but in addition to that, a farmer is a small business. And therefore, a 2-tier tax rate would hit the farmers just like they would hit or wherever, pick Cozy Nook. You know, it really doesn't matter. So this is a longer discussion that I will, frankly, between you and I, go to the wall someday. We'll have a beer, but this yeah. But here's what I want to talk about for 2 seconds. I want to look at Article 14 and 15, if you don't mind. So Article 14, I'm a little concerned about some of the language. One of them is to appropriate the sum of $35 million. I would like to suggest that we up to 35 million and not nail it with a number. These are just thoughts. And in the greater Route 6 area, I think that should be struck after our conversation today and from others. This 35 million is really for the project of the trunk line. And I don't, and you know, I don't believe that we should be paying for more. That's step number one of a long-term process. And I know people are going to just disagree, and that's perfectly fine, because I don't perfectly agree with everything you guys have said either. But having said that, I think that we need to nail a number, and we need to nail a project, because the greater Route 6 area is a much bigger project dollar-wise than the $35 million can handle. That's my opinion. Now, when we get to number 15, so we're assessing 20% of the cost of said sewer project, but isn't it sewer and water project?
No, we are
No,
not
they're not
going
paying for
to
water.
charge betterment on the water. The sewer is the biggest number here.
Well, I
by
understand,
far.
but is it the only number, Maury? That's
We have made a decision to recommend betterments for sewer only.
I'm sorry, I froze again. It's something with my connection.
We have made a recommendation to have betterments for sewer only, no betterments for water. The water line is half built along Route 6, as you probably know.
Yep.
And we're going to get another, half a mile built maybe by this PFAS grant. And we just decided that the water portion was small and we let it go.
Okay. All right. So that answers that. But so the bigger issue really for me is the suggestion about Article 14 and some rework. But again, just my opinion, something to put on the table.
Now, I just want to say that we have emphasized it is up to 35 million, and you have that article draft in front of you. Change it. Put the words up to 35 million, please.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the word greater, there's a member of the Board of Selectmen who really wants that word in there. But if you don't like it, you take it out.
No, it actually says, without getting, and I'm not argumentative, it says town will vote to appropriate a sum of 35 million, which is you were nailing it at a figure. I'm just suggesting up to instead.
I agree.
So that's all.
The only thing I have to say there is that we've had legal beagles refining these warrant articles, and so maybe for certain reasons they got rid of those two words up to. I don't know.
Wait, Maury, if I could, the other reason we have the 35 million is we know our moderator wouldn't let us increase it, so we figured we'd go with the higher value that what we really need, and that could get chopped down. We're aware of that. I don't want to say we went to the extreme. That's what we need to do the project, but we understand it could get chopped down, but Steve wouldn't let us increase it. In other words, if we went in for only contract one for 8.1 million and people stood up that they wanted the whole thing, Steve wouldn't entertain the 35 million when we had it on the warrant for 8.1. So that's why we went to the max. And that's what the public that was at the meeting were requested for, just so you know. And I think, the same thing with the other article you mentioned, Al. Yes, it can be changed.
Okay. All right.
But I think the ballot is already final. So the ballot question has greater Route 6 area.
Oh.
It has no number in it though.
No, but it
dollar number.
right. Okay, anything else, anyone?
Yes,
Oh,
I have a comment.
go ahead.
And that is, remember, the warrant article simply propose a question. The motion is what has the information we're talking about. So Al's point is very legitimate, but it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference what the warrant says. Steve is right. There's a limitation. You can't go beyond it. But the motion is what actually is the activating instrument, shall we say.
I'd just like to add that's probably why it got a unanimous vote, because when we went to that meeting, we had the 8.1, I think it was, Maury, right? Just to go to the overpass. And that's why they wanted to increase it. And some people knew that, like members of the panel too. We all knew that it could be reduced at town meeting, not increased.
Right.
So that's some of the thinking. That's some of the thinking for going for the whole enchilada, if you will.
Roger, go ahead.
Just one quick point as you look at this and you consider the terminology and what's happening. The Route 6 infrastructure, most of it would be considered what's referred to as a general benefit and not a special benefit. And the distinction between the two is that the size of the pipe, the pump stations, all this expensive infrastructure that's going into Route 6 is for the benefit of future neighborhoods and connections. If this was just let's connect the Route 6 project, it would be a lot less expensive and a lot less complicated. But the idea behind the design and engineering is specifically to serve the greater Route 6 location. Now, that might be semantics, but I think it at least plays into the idea behind why the IOC is recommending to the Board of Selectmen that a portion of the project be supported by the town because of general benefits.
Roger, does that mean then that if the town only built the first phase, the infrastructure is in place for potential further extensions, which would be done on a seriatim basis.
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So if they build just the first phase, only the properties adjacent or the neighborhoods adjacent to that first phase would have the potential for connecting.
Yeah, but you then would
So
have
to answer your question, Mr.
infrastructure-
Morton, yes, you're right.
And the-
infrastructure could be added on for later phases at a later time.
Correct.
Yes, the pipe would be sized for figuring to go the whole length of Route 6 and ended and capped off for future expansion.
Right.
And that future
Thank you.
funding model, incidentally, doesn't have to look like this particular funding model. Because those future projects, and I'm just speculating, let's say hypothetically, they all end up being gravity pipes. Those become a lot less expensive. And so I don't know what those costs are going to be sitting here. I
Oh,
can't
that's
say.
the reason I asked the question. Sometimes
Yeah.
you've got to build it small because it's a small project, and then you got to start all over again when it gets bigger. In this
Yeah.
case, you can get in place the stuff for next phases that you can wait to finance and to build at a later date if you wish to.
Yeah.
Correct. And even if those are served by, even if that funding model suggests that the entire project in those neighborhoods, because remember, the more people that connect into the system, the lower the EDU costs will be.
Mhm.
So if you get into a neighborhood where there's a lot of potential connections taking place, it reduces the overall cost, and possibly those projects can be fully funded by betterments.
Well, yeah, I
It's not-
understand that, but I'm saying simply that the town could agree to pay the smaller amount for the first phase, which is more palatable given the size, without prejudicing the future extensions if there were a decision to do so.
Correct.
Right.
Yep, that's a good point, Mr. Morton. Yes, sir.
All I have to say.
Chairman, just a quick correction about the water rates and sewer rates. I was low. I checked my notes here. Paul Furlan from Fall River said they average out for single family at 59 CCF a year. So that's probably about just under $1,100 for both water and sewer. I'm looking at the actual water rates over the last 12 years, and that looks about right. We have some single families at 20 a year. We have a couple higher at like 95. I think that 59 is probably pretty close.
Thanks, Jim. So probably the difference is I'm using it at the Title V max rate of what the potential use is. And I think you're basing it on true usage that average person has, right? But
If I could just correct Jim, you
Thank
said
you.
per year, you mean per day, correct?
No.
No, per year, 59 CCF is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
100 cubic feet. Yep,
I
not gallons.
apologize. I
No,
thought you meant,
No,
I
no
thought you meant
problem.
gallons. My bad.
no.
mhm. Al, did you have your hand back up?
Yes,
Yes, go ahead.
two quick comments.
Excuse me.
1958, my father and my grandfather bought Lee's Market, which was a 5,000 square foot building. And over the next 40 years, he and I grew it into 5,000, so over an acre. Let's put it that way. We added on as we could afford it. So I'm kind of using that as a stupid example of maybe the sewer and water. That's another way of looking at it. The other thing too is that I was thinking the other night, I was flipping through Netflix and I saw a movie, and I feel like I'm Ray Kinsella. Anybody get that one? No? Ray Kinsella built Field of Dreams. And to some extent, this reminds me of Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you spend millions of dollars, maybe somebody up, business or businesses plural will come. And I'm not saying they won't, but it's a leap of faith. There's no question about it. And so between the cost of everything for the local people in Northwestport, the people in the town, whatever, I think we need to look, long and hard at this, at this project in relation to the economic development.
But
And
it's not just economic development. I mean, it really, I think the heart of this is water and sewer, clean water, clean and safe sewer. I don't think this is about economic development.
And I agree with you. And that is where I believe, and good for you, I believe that we are being sold a bill of goods by the planning board and other people by putting economic development at the top of the list.
I'm the chair of economic
This is
development. So
about
watch out.
cleaning up the West Fork River. What's that?
I said I'm chair of economic development. So
Oh, I
watch
know.
out. Al, you're lucky. You're very lucky to have it put away. I was on the 1979 Al Lee's advisory committee that started a committee for your father to expand. And you're lucky I don't have the plaque handy.
And I'm being recorded right now, Steve, so it's even worse than that right now.
Al, read the letters. Read those 5 letters that Karen distributed, please.
2 or 3 times, Maury. Believe me when I tell you.
Thank you.
Time on my hands, so I have. But you're right. It is about clean water, which obviously I have no problem with. It is about drinking water, which I have no problem with. It's none of the above. But the economic development portion maybe should really be down to number 3 on the slide list. Just
Except Route 6 is primarily economic development.
I don't believe that, Maury. And you and I will have a cup of coffee or a beer, and we.
But that will not pay the
Go
bill.
count
And
the
I-
houses.
and I
That will not pay the
respect-
bill. If you're going for economic development, that doesn't pay the bill of the person that you're trying to get them to do clean water and safe and the safe septic system. So you have to pick something. If you're gonna push economic development, then push the cost of this onto the economic development, and don't make the people who can least afford it bear that burden. If you're saying, well, it's economic development, the guy who puts in a gym or a new restaurant, the guy that lives at, once again, 625 State Road doesn't benefit from that very much. So either
Correct.
pick one. Either it's for safe water, safe sewage systems, and economic development will be a benefactor of this. That's fine, but you can't say we're doing this in the face of economic development when Joe Schmo now is going to pay a whole lot more.
Couldn't agree with you more, Cindy. I think right on the.
You're right. If we're just looking at Route 6, we're going to get more betterments from the commercial properties because there are very few residential properties. But
Have you counted them?
Well,
but
Have you
without the
counted
trunk
them?
line,
How
the trunk line, we won't
How
get
many,
into the
how many homes?
Huh?
How many homes are on Route 6? I want you to give me a number.
I don't
There
know.
are far more homes on Route 6 than there are businesses.
Yep.
Well, and I think the other thing.
I believe that I'm sorry, Karen, go
That's
ahead.
okay. And the other, and I agree with what you're saying, Cindy, not to lead with economic development, because I don't believe that's the lead either. Because as Route 6 gets developed, and if it is apartment units, that is really what's going to be developed. That is not commercial development. That is actually probably going to cost the town more than the revenue that it's going to generate from the tax revenue, because you're going to have kids going into the school system, you have police and fire. So you're going to have a lot of costs that go along with that. So the whole concept when we had talked about water and sewer on Route 6 was true commercial development, not resident, not additional apartments and residents. So I wouldn't lead with economic development, because that's a whole other conversation if you want to stay another hour and we can talk about that. But I don't.
Let's call the question.
Tim Gillespie. Yeah, Tim's always great at town meeting.
All right,
All
Karen,
right.
you done with us?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming, and good luck with your next few weeks of communication.
Yeah.
Thank you. It sounds like you guys at least support the contract one area. It sounds like we have some at least support for that. And all your questions are valid. We really appreciate it. It shows we need to dig up some more information. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so now we're on to the next topic. Oh, all right. What's that?
I said, is there another one?
Yeah, we're not going to get all our topics tonight, unfortunately. Because the plan was to also review the warrant articles and really, in part, pick Jim's brain and help us decipher the legal language so we can understand how we need to vote for some of these items. But I don't think we're going to get to that tonight. But the more pressing conversation that we invited from our last week's meeting, when we discussed the budget that was presented to us from the select board, we had some questions that we wanted to, the committee had asked me to invite the select board to have a joint meeting to have a discussion on those. But instead we have our Richard Brewer, the chair of the select board, and Jim Hartnett is here with us, so we can talk to both of them tonight on a couple of our questions. So the two, just as a reminder, so the two topics that we wanted to talk to the select board and understand more from was, one was the split on the revenue share with the school this year. And I'm just going to look it up really quick. The school number, the final school number, the select board added $400,000 of free cash to supplement the school number. And again, we talked about last year's number was 500,000. The intent was to try to drive that need for free cash down 100,000 each year. So that would come out of the budget. So in addition to that, the select board, the normal 54% split of revenue, which would go to the school, the select board provided an extra 13%. So that equates to $252,000 in addition to what would be the normal split. So we wanted to talk to the select board about that. And then we wanted to also talk about the town engineer or any other positions that we had. So Dick or Jim, would you like to talk a little bit about some of the concerns that the committee had, or questions that we had, of what was the rationale for giving the school additional funds? So again, we talked about trying to decrease the budget of 100,000 each year to get them onto a level that was sustainable for the town budget. But we also provided, so we reduced the free cash, but we increased the revenue sharing by 252,000. So trying to understand, which gave them an overall 5.7% increase over last year. And we've talked about in the 5-year plan that we really need to be getting to a 3.5% per year increase. And so we're trying to get some understanding of what generated that number.
Okay, well, I can start with that, and Jim can chime in with the better enumeration of numbers. But here's how I look at it. I think this reflects the sentiment of the board of selectmen, select board. First of all, you're right, Karen, the increase of the schools was about 5.5%, 5.7, whatever it is, which was about the same as last year. Percentage of increase over prior years, what I'm describing. And this year, as we know, we had these three-way discussions in an open forum, duly posted and all that. And we know that the schools are looking for 7%. So the short answer to all of this, the shortest of the short answers, is that select board, looking at this as a harmonious process and not being acrimonious to anybody, we heard their arguments. They made the argument that on the additional Chapter 70 money, that they should have more of a share of that. I happen to think they made some very good arguments. I think if I were on the school board, I may have argued that the school should have all of that money because that money is intended for the schools. But that's arguable. I understand. And as far as the 5446, we generally adhered to that except for the Chapter 70 money. And there was a reason for that. And we felt compelled to respond to their needs in terms of the Chapter 70, and particularly as it relates to disadvantaged kids and handicapped students and so on and so forth. And, you know, my thinking on this was, there's no contract signed here that says the schools are going to accept this and not bring it up at town meeting. So it's not like we reached a deal, we negotiated it, and we had lawyers at each side signing the thing. It's an understanding that this was a fair number. It's a number that if I have to get up and defend this at town meeting, which I think I might have to, because I can say with a straight face, it's fair to the schools and it's fair to the town. So it's a result of a negotiated process, considering the whole ball of wax here, and making it very difficult, if nothing else, for the schools to say that it didn't get their fair share. So that's my rendition of what took place, and that reflects, I think, the general sentiment of the Board of Selectmen, although each should probably describe it a little bit different. Jim, you can add to that. Can't hear you.
Jim, you're on mute.
I don't know if I can describe it much better, but just to step back a minute, right? We have the two separate calculations, right? We have the revenue and expenses that go through the budget, and then we have a separate calculation that determines the 54% split that we've been using for years. They're both somewhat independent of each other. So when I met with department heads, when I listened to the school presentation, and they had a very good presentation, I think provided the information we're looking for that we've requested over the years. I was trying to get them to a certain number, and I was also trying to keep the departments at a level that gets us through the next year. And in order to do that, the school had to get, the $1.3 million, and that is what was put into the budget, and that went before the Board of Selectmen. At that time, the split was calculated at 62-38. Karen, you picked up an error in my original spreadsheet, which actually increased it to 67%. But the actual dollars that are going to the school did not increase with that percentage. The actual budget numbers for the town departments and the school didn't change with that correction. That was strictly on the percentage calculation. So, when I recommended the budget to the Board of Selectmen, I was trying to get to a certain number for the schools based on their presentation and based on what I thought their needs were, balancing the town's needs at the same time. And that's where we came at.
Thanks. Just
My final comment,
go ahead.
if I may, and I didn't mean to cut you
That's
off,
okay.
Karen. We also do this, this is part of a process. This process now has been completed on our end. It goes to the Finance Committee, and you are the final arbiters in terms of what goes to town meetings. So we do that understanding that you might have a different point of view on some of it or all of it. And that's okay. And we're not hostile to that. So we did our best under all the circumstances, trying to be fair to all, trying to give the school its fair and the town its fair share. And this is where we ended up. And I think it's a very, very logical place to be, and one that I can defend.
Thanks,
Whoever's
Dick.
going to speak on behalf.
Just a quick question. Did you discuss whether you felt that this was a permanent shift in the percentage, or was this an exceptional this year only shift?
Absolutely. Pause. I'm sorry. When you pause, I don't know if you're done.
No, go ahead. I was
Unintentional.
thinking, but I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, absolutely, positively an exception for 1 year. And that's why we were careful about the 5446, not counting this Chapter 70 money, was largely maintained, maybe even exactly maintained. This was not intended to be forever. And also remind ourselves that the free cash was 500,000 last year. Now 400,000, you'd mentioned it earlier. It's going to be 300,000 next year. And, this was a 1 year deal. They were always a 1 year deal. And I don't think any of this sets any precedent anyway, but That's my own point of view. Others might argue with that. But it's to answer your question. No, it was a one-time thing.
Great, thank you. Hugh, go ahead.
Jim, Dick, I believe that the original budget had the 54-46 split in it. And if that is the case, and you then moved it to 67, or what is it for the school share, where did that extra money come from? What other budgets were affected?
It came from Chapter 70. And the increase in Chapter 70 that was not contemplated in the first rendition of the budget.
So there are no reductions of other department budgets proposed to
No.
raise that money?
No.
The big difference was the Chapter 70. The other difference was I had calculated the percentage wrong, which is a separate independent calculation from all the budget numbers.
And
That certainly
and
is-
just to follow up on Hugh's point, so this happens every year where the next level of budget increases or decreases happen, but traditionally, when the state aid comes through the next level, we've continued to share it the same way, right? So what that, under those circumstances, what that would have meant, that would have provided an extra $100,000 to the town side, which then could have used it for a position where it was needed or other expenses that the town side is also lacking. So that additional revenue didn't give that opportunity to the rest of the town departments to really increase other places where it's needed. So although nothing was cut, the towns didn't have the benefit of trying to restore some of the expenses that it's lacking.
Good point.
And I would say you're correct on that. And we will have to keep that in mind in the future. Because I don't see this as a one-year event. I see it as a multi-year event.
Yep.
Anything else, Hugh?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Al, go ahead.
No, I would just echo what Gary said. My concern is that we are going down a slippery slope by altering the, and we're not altering it by 1 or 2 or 3%. We're altering it by 13%, which is a 20% increase over the prior year. And do I get completely, and I know Tom is on the line, and I respect Tom and his staff. It's nothing to do with them. We're talking money now, and money is fungible. But I just think that it is.
You froze.
Then where does it go?
Al, maybe put your video off because you're having some troubles. That might help.
Okay, sorry, I'm having a little break up here. I don't know how far you heard on my rant.
Most of it.
But you get it completely, and I sympathize completely. But at the same time, we have an entire town and all the different departments within the town for us to focus on. And when I see 5 people, and we continually use the highway department as an example, and with all the miles and everything, how can we continue to shrink the differential between the school budget and the town budget and continue to operate? I just don't see it. So
This will help you a little bit, Al. But if you're talking about the highway department, you got the wrong example. The highway department has money in it now to hire more people, but they have not been able to do it.
Because the
Or
salary
they've
isn't
elected
high
not
enough.
to do it.
Increase
So
the
you'd
salary.
be better served by talking about a different department.
That money could have been used to increase the salary so they could hire people.
I think you have a simplistic view, Cindy, of the highway department and how it operates.
Well,
It wouldn't be that simple. They had an extra $100,000. It wouldn't change the fact that they are understaffed. There are multiple reasons for that.
Well, let's not focus on a specific department. Let's focus on the fact that we have had a split that works improperly or whatever, it has worked pretty well. And all of a sudden, we've changed it by 20% in 1 year. Not blaming Jim. You've got so damn many things, Jim, on your plate. What's a formula? Okay, it happened. I would actually, and Dick, don't take this the wrong way, but I'd actually blame you guys for accepting the difference and not ratcheting it back.
Well, Al, my response to you on that point is that the schools wanted a 7% increase, and we resisted that. So we held the line on that to give them basically the same increase they got last year. We also recognized that the 5% increase, when everybody else, like the other departments, getting 3 to 3.5, is unsustainable. We know that, but you fight these battles every year.
Okay, fair enough. And I still like it, Dick.
Same here, Al.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tom Auburn.
You're on mute, Tom. You're still on mute. Karen, may I just jump in quickly while Tom's getting his
Yes,
microphone?
sure thing.
I guess I have one question. I don't have the figures here in front of me. Jim, perhaps you do. What is the total amount that we receive in Chapter 70 aid?
Tell you in a minute.
I think it's fair to say it's not $20 million, right?
No, it is not.
No.
Not 20
So every year, the schools receive 100% of Chapter 70 funding because they receive $20 million in total funding. Some of that comes from the revenue that we receive from the state, offset by the assessments from that. So if there is an increase in the Chapter 70 aid that's received, in essence, money is fungible. In essence, those savings do get passed on. There are communities, I had gone through several communities in the Commonwealth. There are communities that fund, believe it or not, their school system with only Chapter 70 aid, because you must fund your schools with at least 100% of Chapter 70. So anyway, they receive 100% of Chapter 70. If it goes up more, that just means that the tax burden to the town is less. And so we have shifted not the Chapter 70 funding per se, but we've shifted the tax burden a little bit because they always receive 100% of the Chapter 70. I know that there is a division of the overall aid that we receive, that we divide it evenly, but the net result is they always receive at least 100% of Chapter 70. They get certain percentages of the other revenue, but they always get the Chapter 70. And I will remind everyone that back when their enrollment was down 25%, we did not decrease the formula then. So it's not a type of thing that, well, times are tough, so the increase should be higher. When enrollment was down, the percentage division was the same. Now, I'm not saying one way or the other, this is bad or this is good. I don't want to use this as strictly a Chapter 70 argument because I don't think that it's truly representative of how the funding works overall as far as the division comes down to. But it's, there are other needs that I think it should have been divided. Perhaps that excess funding perhaps should have been divided and not the 100% additional gone over to that school side. Maybe you should have split the 250, 54, 46. There are other needs in town, but, and we have satisfied some of these in the budget, but I'm just talking about the nature of the discussion here, that it's a little bit, I don't want to say misleading because it's not misleading, but I think it's semantics here using Chapter 70 as the example, because they get all the Chapter 70 money. Thank you.
It's about 5.6 million.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
the
you,
question,
Cindy.
Jim, maybe we're talking about the additional Chapter 70 money. That's what it was riveted around.
Right,
that
but they
was
still
split.
get more, they still get 100% of the Chapter 70 money. I mean, we fund them at $20 million and we only receive 5.6. So, you know, money is fungible. So no matter what it is, it's not coming just from Chapter 70. So it's not like, well, they're entitled to that or they should get that much because the Chapter 70 money went up. Our overall tax burden was impacted differently because the Chapter 70 money was higher and they receive 100% of it anyway. It's just semantics. I'm just bringing up a point that that's not that money is fungible and it doesn't always work out the way that it's being described, but that's not a testimony one way or the other as to how it should have been divided. I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Right. I think I don't want to spend too much time on the semantics of it, but it became a palatable argument to get more funds to it. And we talked about this in our joint meetings, and we talked about if we wanted to go down that road and not do the 54%, then we should entertain other conversations about other revenue, maybe that shouldn't be shared with the school at all. Or maybe there's expenses that the town is bearing the burden of, and maybe the school should share more of those expenses. And we didn't want to get into all of that because then you really make things really complicated. And by maintaining a 54% split on all revenue, just is easier for everyone and it's consistent. And this is discussions, and I still hold strongly with that as well. I mean, I don't want to go and, dispute and come up with other expenses that should be shared in a different fashion or other revenue that should not be shared equally. I mean, it's, what are we doing? We're wasting time. Go ahead, Nancy, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. We had, let's just take it back a little bit. This is one of those extraordinary years. This is why I advocate for the special extraordinary purpose fund in the general fund for special needs. This was the tsunami that has never happened, that happened with the $750,000 of two children, just two, that came into the district. I don't think we would be having this conversation tonight had we not retained students, brought back students from going to charter schools, and had gotten more in Chapter 70 that we ever anticipated. Chapter 70 never covers Westport. It never has. It can't cover the school budget. It would be idealistic that it did. That's the thought process, but it doesn't because of the formula and where Westport lands. But we were out of the formula because of the very thing that part of the reason we built the new school was to retain students and keep our kids here in Westport. And I think that resulted obviously in more Chapter 70 money. And because of the tsunami, this one-time special needs hit that will be then covered by the circuit breaker in part next year is something that we need to be able to cover. And that's what the finance committee presentation was by the school committee. That's, I think, what the select board thought about deviating from the formula, that sometimes formulas need to be deviated. And I'm not saying that a tsunami can't happen on the town side as well in some given year, but this happens to be that. And we had additional Chapter 70 monies, and we're talking about $100,000. The school department is still going to be cutting positions. There are still teachers that will be cut with this budget. It does not fulfill the needs of the school. On the town side, I understand that you're not filling some positions, but you're hiring back some positions that we have lost over the years, which is great. But on the school side, we are still cutting despite the fact that we're getting this additional $100,000. So I think that's why the changes, and I don't think that we should get caught up in the semantics of the formula. If we can't move when it happens on either side of the budget and say this is just what it is and everybody has to live with it, then we're talking, another couple teaching positions. And so that is where the issue arises, and that's why it came about. And, you know, this wasn't expected, it wasn't anticipated, it was given. And when you then get additional Chapter 70 money because you're retaining students, and then we cut more teachers, then you won't have that. I think that when we're looking for sources of revenue to the town, and you've looked at all of these different avenues for revenue sources, this Chapter 70 money is a revenue source. Retaining more students brings more money to the town. And, you know, returning to the formula is, again, as Dick said, is a year by year evaluation, and you go back to it next year. The town is still benefiting by the fact that we got additional money from Chapter 70 that we didn't have before. So I think that that's the reason it's an exceptional year. It just is. The facts are what they are. I mean, they're undeniable that this was something that threw our budget totally off because of these unexpected students that need to be out of district. So again, it was unexpected. The Chapter 70 money, the additional money wasn't expected. And I thought that the select board deemed fit. I thought we should get, I mean, the school advocated for more and the select board said no. And so I thought they were quite conservative, and as was Jim and what they said. And we are still going to sustain cuts. So I would ask that the finance committee support this so that people at town meeting can get behind this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Tom, are you
Yes.
back in? Okay,
Yeah, I'm
here
sorry.
we go. All right.
Yeah, I was having technical problems. My apologies to everybody. I'll be quick. Boston Globe about 2 hours ago. But for the last 2 years, the Superintendent's Association said the inflation rate the state used to calculate most required costs was far too low, 4.5%. That's the highest allowed under the school funding law, except employee health benefits, which have no cap. But actual inflation for schools was 8% for this fiscal year and 7% for the last fiscal year. Well, inflation for the next school year is projected to be much lower. The association said the budget problems persist because those earlier higher costs are now built into expenses. We have a major problem, not just in Westport. I'm getting text messages from superintendents throughout the local area who are getting decimated because the funding formula simply doesn't work for communities like Westport. And the real argument and the real energy needs to go at looking at the state formula, because I attend these meetings and we try to be as cooperative as possible, understanding that we live in a social community that we all depend on one another. And that's why I'm proud to say that you will not find us ever bad-mouthing one department over the other. That's just not going to happen. But the fact of the matter is, with free cash over the past 10 years, we've been averaging 3.2% increase per budget. Without that free cash, we'd be at an unbelievably unsustainable 1.6%. The formula is the problem, and it's not just a Westport problem. And I want to get that out there because there is this notion out there that the schools are just being greedy pigs. It is amazing what we've been able to do with the budget that we have. And I'm exceedingly proud that we were incredibly judicial in not using ESSA funding in an effort to create structural deficits that would have made the current situation even more insane. So I'll leave it at that at this point. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Al, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Tom said. We're dealing with the aftermath of all these crazies in Boston. My words, nobody else's words. When it comes to these formulas and all of the things that are going on, and we're kind of the collateral damage, if you will, that have to pick up the pieces. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm not smart enough to know that, but it is not our fault. It is not our fault. And we are constrained between all of these crazy admin and mandates on one hand, and Prop 2.5 on the other hand, that are just constraining. And so just wanted to toss that out as an echo to Tom and Nancy and anybody else that it's this is not a sustainable model. This really is not a sustainable model over the next 1 to 3 to 5 years. I don't know what the answer is, but it's only going to get worse, not better. So there you go.
Thank you, Al. Q, go ahead.
The problem is the state. It has been for some time, and they couldn't care less about us. So we are where we are.
Great, thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. Right. You know, no one here, I haven't heard any comment through any of the conversations that we've had disputing anything that's in the school budget that we didn't think was appropriate. So there's nothing, we're not saying the school's overspending or we've never said that. And you all did a fantastic presentation of explaining where your situation is and where the money's going. And so it's all about, the numbers is what it's about. So we appreciate the impact that it's having. And again, you're absolutely right, Tom. It's not just Westport, it's everywhere. Anyone else have any comments on the school budget? Any other questions? Go ahead, Jim, go ahead.
Just one thing on the percentage, right? So I can get the percentage closer if that's the intent. Health insurance, we had budgeted a 10% increase, it came in at 7.4. I'd rather not reduce that because it was tight to begin with, but you know, that's 100,000 there. Diamond came in slightly less than what we had projected, not a big number, maybe $20,000, you know, but again, these are things that next year, if we reduce that, we're going to be in trouble next year. So I'd rather not. I'd rather leave the percentage off a little bit more than cut these things too close. But if the percentage is the main thing and the thought is to get it closer, that's something we could look at.
Great, thank you.
I would just say that I have complete trust in Jim and his numbers, and I would agree. We need a buffer. We need a buffer for next year because it ain't going to get any better next year than it is right now. So that would be my my thought.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you for, so the school was one of the numbers that the committee wanted to talk about, and then the committee wanted to talk, just get an understanding on, Jim, you had a list of, on the town side, a number of positions that you felt were lacking or critical, but obviously the town engineer rose to the surface and that was put in the budget, so we just wanted to get a little understanding of understanding that. Although the last 2 hours of the water and sewer discussion leads into a lot of that, but we'll ask if you can just give us a little guidance on what rose that position to the top.
Yeah, so I think the Route 6 is one of the primary ones, and whether it gets approved at the ballot box or not, the project overall is not going to go away. It may be reduced in size. It may take a few years to fund. It may never get funded, but there's still going to be work to be done on it. We have Tickle Road, Route 177 is a roundabout going in there. That's a $225,000 design contract, $2 million plus construction project. We're dealing with different earmarks on that we're monitoring. 150 from Senator Roderick's 1 year, and that we carried over year to year, and $75,000 earmark as well. We're looking at another Gifford Road and Route 177 intersection improvement. We're managing $150,000 earmark with that, $38,000 design project, and $112,000 construction project. Drift Road Bridge replacement, we just had a meeting the other night. That's a $300,000 design project that's currently being funded under the state small bridge program, but construction could be $2 million plus on that. That's not something we can fund with town funds, but hopefully there'll be some state funding available. But each one of these projects, even though they're state funding, involve town resources, town oversight, town meetings. it's time consuming. We have the Hicks Bridge Landing redesign. It's currently being worked on by the Landing Commission, but there's contracts for design and possibly construction. They have Seaport Economic Development grants with that, along with earmarks that all have to be monitored. And each one of these earmarks and grants that we get, and we've been very fortunate over the last few years to get a number of grants for the town, but each one has reporting requirements. Each grant is different, so each reporting requirement is different. Some are quarterly, some are annually, some have to be expended by the end of June, some carry into following years. So those are just a few. We have the cemetery expansion. That's a $42,500 design project right now. That's going to have to go into construction in the next couple of years. We have Town Hall HVAC system, which is a $600,000 project, which was being funded through grants, incentives, and a little bit of CPC money. But there's involvement design as well as construction oversight with that. We're still working on the school building project, which is a time-consuming project, and that's still ongoing. We have the old high school that we're looking at that hasn't been decided yet, but that's going. We talked about the Route 6. You know, we're looking at $1.8 million in design money alone, just overseeing those and reviewing the bills on a monthly basis. It just can't be done with the staff that we have. We're looking at a Macumber loop right now for the water line, which is separate from the Route 6 project. We're getting very positive, you know, the feedback that we're getting on the grant application is very positive. There's a very good chance that we could get that. All these things are overseen by engineering consultants, the construction, the design, but there's still oversight from the town that needs to be done. We have, in addition to the Macumber Loop, the Board of Selectmen just authorized an additional $478,000 for additional water and sewer design for some of the neighborhoods over there. Those need to be done. You also have Chapter 90 that's being overseen by the Highway Department, and they hire a private consultant to oversee the paperwork. A town engineer would be able to do that. The consultant that they've been using has been retired. He's come to Westport just to cover the town's projects, but he may not be available next year. You know, and there's a number of other projects. You have the MS4 projects and MS4 permitting, which is the stormwater permitting throughout the town, and the regulations that are coming down from the EPA. We were audited a few years ago, and that was like a 4-day audit. We were able to get through that audit, but you know, that's kind of fallen to the wayside a bit because we don't have a lot of resources to oversee that. So I guess the bottom line is that there's more than enough work for an engineer to do. There's more than enough work than we can do with the current staff we have right now. And that goes forward whether we do the Route 6 project or not.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody have any questions for Jim on that? Or Dick? I think we're still awake, right?
With baby.
Oh, go ahead, Al.
So yeah. So before I go to bed, I'm in complete agreement with Jim. This is overload. I've said this before, you know, at other meetings. This is just total overload, and we cannot pile all of this plus the other stuff that is going on every day with Jim, with Susan Brayton, with whatever, and expect an outcome overall that is going to be positive for the town. So, you know, Theo, you go down the list of people that are working, you know, they're getting paid 8 hours and they're working 10 to 12, 14, and when they go home, their brain is just fried. If I still own the liquor store, I would give Jim infusions of single malt whiskey. I mean, it's great. I mean, so you know, I find the money somewhere. This has to be, I mean, in my opinion, this has to be done. This cheapness of wherever, you know, certain people are going, it just can't continue. We're not going to cheap our way into progress.
Thank you, Al. Go ahead, Cindy.
Where are you gonna put this guy? You don't even have any office space, do you?
We don't. We have a possible office space up here that the housing trust is using, and they're not fully using that now. There may be some space over the highway department that would be ideal over there, but yeah. Every solution has another problem, right?
Yeah. Any other questions for Jim or Dick on the budget questions we had? I don't think so.
I suggest we let them go to bed.
Yeah, we can let you retire for the night. I appreciate your being here the whole time. Jim, we may need you soon, maybe a next meeting. I don't know what your availability is to kind of help walk us through some of the warrant articles. They're all new to us. Are you available on the next Tuesday night?
I think so.
Okay.
Can't wait.
It feels like an overwhelming warrant this year, but thank you. We'll touch base, and then we got the biggest one, the water and sewer past us. So we're an easy street now, right?
For what it's worth, I met with Jim today and gave him a heads up on many of the items that we had discussed. So I think that he will at least have some advance basis for our discussion, and I can go over some of the items with you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jim. Good night.
All right.
Thank you.
You guys
Dick.
have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, so it's 9:30 here, so we should pretty much look to wrap it. We can approve the minutes again at the next meeting, but I wanted to ask before we go, the other very important warrant article that we need presentation for is the Internet Advisory. Duncan, did you and Al connect on that, and what's in queue for that?
Yeah, I mean, here's my opinion. I sent you minutes. There's not a lot to talk about. We've, the select board has sent a letter to the DPU to notify them that we're considering a municipal light organization. I mean, there's no funding, there's no board, there's no nothing. So, I don't know why that article is in there. I just think that this thing is 2 or 3 years out, maybe more, and so that's just my opinion. I don't know whether I'm supposed to have an opinion or not, but that's my opinion.
So we need to understand why the article is in here. So there's some reason for it. So we need to understand what that is and what the ramifications are on that. So since there is an article in the warrant, there must be some reason. We don't know what it is, but there's some reason.
Well, I mean, I wasn't even sure what my role is, as a new person here in the meeting. I'm happy to talk to David Cole, who seems to know what's going on, or Shana, and find out. I mean, why is it? I mean, you'd have to hire a general manager. You'd have to get a debt exclusion. You'd have to do all those things, before we can do anything. So I'm just saying, I'm shocked that we're talking about it.
Well, so what we need, so just to be clear, so since there is an article in the warrant, we need to understand what it is and why it's there, because the finance committee is going to need to make a recommendation at town meeting. So we need to understand what it is and what it means. And so I know since you're new, you wouldn't be able to relate that to us. So we would need somebody from the committee who would be able to explain it to us, so we can then make a decision on a recommendation.
I will be happy to meet with Duncan, and not that I'm that old in the group. I mean, I've only been here for 6 months, and to sit down with the rest of the group. But I completely agree with Duncan. This is too much too soon, with no answers. So I don't even know why it's around.
Yeah, I mean, what we
what
need.
is the warrant? What does it mean? What are they asking for? I mean,
Well, that's what the presentation needs to tell us. So somebody needs to tell us.
but there isn't. I can tell you, I went to the meeting. There's nothing.
Isn't,
There is nothing.
isn't there a
They're getting a letter. They're getting a letter from the DPU saying, acknowledging that we're creating a municipal light board. There is nothing else.
isn't there an
Remember,
article in the
everybody,
warrant?
this came up, I think, last year with also stuff talking about financing, issuing this, issuing that. Nobody understood how it was going to work and what the responsibility of the town would be. It sounds like now all that stuff has fallen by the wayside. And there's nothing
I mean,
to it.
I can tell you, there's, you know, I mean, they're gonna lay it off on the select board. They haven't decided whether they're gonna elect a board or appoint a board. You know, there's a need for a general manager, and there's no funding anywhere. So again, I have no idea why this is in the warrant.
In the prior votes, it was required that we had those 2 successive town meeting votes in 2 successive years. Okay, that was required for them to continue to move forward. So I think in an effort to not lose momentum, they need to be able to establish the ability at some point in the future to create this board. Because if 3 years
makes
from
sense.
now, if 3 years from now we bring it up again, people are going to be like, what? What are you talking about? We've had this on the warrant now for 2 years in a row to acknowledge the existence of the possibility of a municipal lighting plant, which is also, you know, misleading because it's not for lighting at all, but they are scattered throughout the, you know, the Commonwealth. And it's a successive rule. It's a successive votes that must be taken by rule. And this probably finishes the process. I'm not saying I know that for a fact, but I think it all just ties in. I don't think the prior 2 votes we have taken went by the wayside. I don't know if the project is.
I don't think so either. And we've moved ahead. We're going to get the letter. I will contact Shayna or David Cole and figure out, you know,
What we need is simply
what we're approving, because there's nothing to approve, but we're approving, you know, what we're approving in this, with this warrant.
I've always been cautious about this. I thought it was intended to be fiber optic, but the lighting plant, something's being squished into a statute that wasn't designed for it in the first place. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but it means you got to be careful about what the details are. And somebody presumably knows what's going on.
It's what the statute. It's what the statute allows currently.
I know, but the statute is designed for municipal electric power plants, which this isn't. But I understand that background. We simply need someone who tells us why this is being done. So we can react.
I will get to David Cole and figure that out. And, you know, I have some knowledge about this. I also understand what, you know, about the fiber optic, all of that stuff. So I'm happy to do that. I was shocked to see it on the warrant. And again, I've been to the meeting, you know, Karen, I sent you the minutes. You can read them. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to echo a little bit, Duncan, what Hugh just said. I am always skeptical when the state comes down with some edict or mandate or regulation regarding A, B, C, D. What's in the fine print? So, you know, maybe you can suss that out a little bit.
Yeah, and David Cole has been carrying the water on this thing and is, you know, in touch with the DPU. He's in touch with the other communities. I mean, he's really doing, you know, the yeoman's share of the work here, and so I know he knows this stuff. I just don't.
Yeah.
But David also at the same time, and this is just my opinion, not the finance committee's opinion, is that David, I don't believe, has found a government agency that he doesn't love.
Well, yeah, that's fine, and I'm with you, Al. I mean, I'm sure we agree, but you know, again, I'm listening to, you know, just from my own personal perspective. I mean, you know, Fairhaven is not home yet, and Falmouth is not home yet. You know, there's 40 of these things around the state. So, I mean, you know, there's nothing imminent. You know, again, we need to keep the process rolling, so it's open for our consideration. But I'm telling you, Al, you were worried about dying before the sewer's built. You know, you're probably in the same boat with this municipal light plant.
Yeah, Duncan, what's important, I'm with Al. We don't want to approve something not knowing what it's about, find out later is something we don't like.
Exactly, right, exactly. That's
Right.
why we need a presentation that someone can explain to us why it's on the
Yeah,
warrant.
but I'm telling you, there's nothing to explain. We have gotten a
There's something
letter
that David's been
says
working on
that
with
notified them.
and he
There is
provided
nothing to
to us.
explain at this point.
But it's on the
There's a
warrant.
reason.
It's on,
Right,
there's a reason it's on the warrant. We need to understand why it's on the warrant. Because we can't,
Well, that's a different question, and I will get
yeah,
an answer to
that
that.
is the question.
That is the question.
That is the question, because the finance committee has to either vote to recommend, vote to not recommend,
Yeah,
or take no position. We have to make a determination, and I can't sit there and I don't have any information to make any decision I can't shrug my shoulders and go, it's on the warrant. I don't know. Okay.
well,
We need
I
we need
first
an
saw
answer.
the warrant this week, and I was shocked to see it there. I will get the answer, and we'll figure it
Great.
out.
All right. Thank you. All
I've-
right. Sean and David Cole might be too good. They can, great to come in for 10, 15 minutes, explain to us what it is and what the next steps are and where the project is. That would be helpful to have a quick.
Let's move on.
Yeah. All right. I think the other big one, maybe that's not big at all.
It's not.
Right. I think we've passed the budget and the water and sewer are the two most difficult ones. So Sydney, maybe you and I can kind of touch base again, and we'll have a meeting next week, and we'll try to get through as many warrant articles as we can. And if we can, when we get through them, if we can start to make our recommendations next week, whatever we can vote through, we should be doing that. So this way
You just made a statement that we've gotten through the budget, but we have not voted on the
correct.
budget.
We have, what I should say is
Okay.
we have all the information in our possession.
Right, okay.
That we can then talk about it. We don't need a further
Okay.
presentation. Thank you for clarifying. Yes. Yes. So, next week, same time, same place,
All right.
March 19th.
Can't wait.
6:30.
Can't wait.
Same bad time, same bad station,
Yeah.
right?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if we.
Motion to
Thank
adjourn,
you so
please.
much.
Second,
Thank you.
Second.
Al,
Aye.
Cindy,
Aye, Cindy Brown.
thank you. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
thank you. Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
is Christopher is here? Yes. he
Yep,
is.
he's here. He's here.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Zach,
Aye.
I believe we lost Gary and I don't know when. I will find out. I texted him to ask him, but I don't know. So no Zach, no Gary, and Karen Rouse, I meeting adjourned.